Good evening, everyone. Welcome to residents, to my fellow board members, to some of the senior staff here in town. We are here tonight to hold our interview candidates for our finalists for the town administrator position for the town of Westwood. And so the way this is going to work is we have 3 candidates, each of whom will have about an hour to introduce themselves, answer questions in a round-robin format from my colleagues and I. We have Bernie Lynch here from Paradigm Associates, or Community Paradigm, who will introduce each of the candidates. And given that we are beginning 3 minutes late, I will just make sure that we call this meeting to order. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, the meeting is officially open.
Okay. If I could, Brent, your first candidate here tonight, this is being done in alphabetical order, just so people know that, is Brian Golden. And Brian is with us tonight. He's had an opportunity to do quite a bit of work looking into the town, is looking forward to meeting with you and answering your questions. So, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Welcome, Brian. On behalf of my colleagues and I and our community at large, we want to thank you for your interest in serving as our next town administrator. This next hour is meant for you to help us get to know you, your interest in our community, and the qualifications you have to serve as our next town administrator, so that we can navigate the many challenges that this community faces together. And with that, I'd like you to make some opening remarks about yourself and why this role here in Westwood, and in particular, my colleagues and I will be looking to then move into a round robin of questions that I mentioned earlier on specific areas of interest that will help us deliberate come Sunday night in making this important decision for our community. So with that, welcome, and the floor is yours. Actually, before that, as Tuesday was Veterans Day, thank you very much for your service.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and through you to the members of the Select Board. I very much appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation with you this evening, and thank you for the invitation to do so. My name is Brian Golden, and I am born and raised in the city of Boston, and spent my youth in the city, was educated at high school and attended college, ultimately law school in Virginia. I went into the Army just out of law school. I spent 30 years in the Army, about 7 years on active duty, and 23 in a reserve capacity, retiring 2 years ago. The Army came in fits and starts at different points of active and in reserve, so there was a variety of civilian functions interspersed in the past 3 decades. When I left the Army for the first time, I came home, was elected to the House of Representatives. I served Alston, Brighton, and Boston, and a significant piece of the town of Brookline. I went on to become a public utility commissioner at what is now the Department of Public Utilities. I became the regional administrator for the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services for a few years, responsible mostly for Medicaid, Medicare issues in the 6 New England states, and moved from there over to Boston City Hall, where I have been until very recent years. I went to a senior staff role at the Boston Redevelopment Authority, ultimately becoming the chief executive of the authority with the arrival of Mayor Marty Walsh in 2014. I left City Hall in 2022 and have been practicing law in the private sector since. The appeal of this job is fundamentally rooted in the fact that I have, for better or worse, spent the vast majority of my career in the public sector, and there's distinct upsides, there's downsides. Not the most lucrative, but I would argue the most interesting. The jobs I've done have allowed me to play a role in things that really make a difference in people's lives, and I am eager to revisit that sense of mission. Again, whether it's in military service or civilian service, I was always doing things that I thought mattered to a large number of people. And if you look at each of those jobs, they each had significant impact. That sense of mission is what kept me engaged and excited about the work that I did. Wasn't always happy, wasn't always joyful, it wasn't always fun, but it was always deeply meaningful. And sometimes my work was about really serious controversy and fixing broken things. I think of my time in Iraq. I was sent to Iraq right after the Abu Ghraib scandal, when the detainee abuse issue had reared its head and really given the nation a black eye. So they sent people to work on detention issues, and that was painful, difficult work in a painful, difficult environment, but it really mattered. We had to get that right. U.S. compliance with international law. But in every one of these aspects, there were hard things to do. Sometimes there were fun things to do. Sometimes there were happy things to do. But they were always meaningful. And when I think about Westwood and what this role presents, it's not necessarily about fixing some major broken thing. This is an extremely healthy place, almost surreal how healthy it is from a fiscal standpoint, from a financial standpoint, quality of life, quality of services, quality of the schools, proximity to Boston. It's pretty, it's lovely. My mom lives here. There's a lot of good reasons to be in Westwood. But to work in Westwood, not so much about fixing a broken thing. It's about nurturing something that's healthy and understanding that if you do not continue to nurture it, it takes a long time to build something great, but you can destroy something great overnight. Destruction is quick. Creation takes longer. And I think I'd like to be part of that creative endeavor of nurturing the town and taking it forward, understanding that the foundation is remarkably strong, but understanding that there are headwinds coming, and that my skill set in the variety of functions I just described for you sort of prepare me to play a constructive role in the town.
Well, thank you. So you touched on several things in there that I would like to probe a little further on with respect to your leadership style. You talked about being able to do meaningful, impactful work and overcome challenges. Tell us about your leadership style and what makes you unique in the way you approach challenging situations to ensure positive outcomes and the type of meaningful impact. And give us some examples where that is applicable.
Okay, so 2014, Mr. Chairman, I become Chief Executive at the Boston Redevelopment Authority. And one thing that I'd had the good fortune to sort of experience was the prior 4 years in a senior staff role. And I recognized things that were either being done or weren't being done that I wanted to address, that I wanted to correct. First and foremost, I thought there was very little communication from senior leadership with the rank and file of the organization, the junior-most staff to the most senior staff. There was very little interaction. It was very much a top-down approach. Even senior staff didn't meet that frequently. Never mind meeting with the broader array of professionals in the organization. But at the same time, this organization is responsible for planning and overseeing real estate development in one of the great cities of the world. And we were about to embark on the biggest building boom in the city's history. So that meant a lot of significant planning to get ready to create the form for the development that was going to occur, and then permitting the actual development. It was 90 million square feet of development permitted during the Walsh administration, about 8 years. So I thought we need to have sort of a team ethic here. This isn't going to be top down. This isn't going to even just be senior staff. I began to pull senior staff together twice a week, no matter what, to discuss the really serious challenges that the city and the agency was facing, both short-term, medium-term, long-term. We devised a new general city plan, which had not been done in Boston, a very sophisticated place, had not been done since 1965. There was no general city land use plan. we devised that. We hired new staff, and my attitude was, not only should I be with senior staff, but I should be with all staff. It's 250 people was about the average from year to year. And I made sure that they understood what the mission of the organization was, what their role in that mission was, that they had an opportunity to raise concerns, to voice their perspective on some of the matters we were dealing with, sometimes very controversial. You build big things. People can often find that vexatious in their neighborhoods, but we had a free-flowing conversation in the organization so that we could have really constructive organizations and a common approach out in the neighborhoods. So I met with all 250 of the staff on a regular basis. We would have all staff meetings across the street from Boston City Hall at Faneuil Hall, where I could explain what we were embarking upon or what was well underway, and they could have an opportunity to ask questions. And I kept sort of working that during my entire time at the agency, making sure that the junior-most staff and the senior-most staff had access to me, had access to the information I had, and that it was broadly shared so people were empowered to go out into the neighborhoods and do big things.
Follow-up to that. Compare and contrast that experience from a scale standpoint and how that translates, into a smaller suburban community where, you must have done a great deal to create the conditions to allow and fuel that type of growth. Obviously, there are, a whole, on a smaller scale, number of constituencies that you've got to bring along to create that type of condition here in a town like Westwood. How would your experience in BRA in Boston translate into this type of community where if there are things that we want to get done to help fuel some growth, how would you approach that?
So, Mr. Chairman, the question of scale is important because superficially, I think you could look at my background and say it was, whether it was state rep or years later, being at City Hall at the Redevelopment Authority during a great building boom, say like, am I more a city character as opposed to a suburban town character? And I'd say scale isn't the important concern. It is an issue, but the skill set and the nature of the issues are very similar. You can scale up, you can scale down, but you're still dealing with issues involving human beings' attitudes and opinions, and what makes a society function well, whether it's a big city or a smaller town. The same concerns exist here that existed, a few miles east of us. And my focus was on empowering staff by making sure staff always knew what we were trying to accomplish, by planning our future, by understanding each staff member's role in executing upon that plan. What is the mission and what is your role in the mission? That was really key because people feel invigorated by that. They feel energized when they know this is for me to accomplish. So that's what's going on in staff. Again, where it's 250 people or 50 people, you've got a similar dynamic of motivating people to get things done for a municipality, for the public. But it's also about how we handle the outside world. How are we interacting? How are we communicating? How are we giving a meaningful voice to the people of the community in the planning and development decisions that are going to affect them? That was really key. Because it can't be just the municipality directing this is what we think is best, and we're going to do it. It doesn't work that way. Maybe back in the old days it was. I think there was an argument. The BRA was very much a top-down thing. It bulldozed the West End and destroyed 40 blocks and displaced thousands of people. Back in the day, there was a top-down mentality about how things worked. Those days are long gone. In the 21st century, we understand, we know that you have to explain things to people, empower them with information. useful information that gives them a meaningful voice in their affairs. And what I take so much pride in from my time at City Hall that I think I would hopefully replicate in Westwood is that as difficult as some of the tasks were, as difficult as some of our decisions and our goals were, we had an iterative process of coming back over and over and over again to explain our goals, to listen to people, to then process what we're getting from folks, coming back to them and explaining what we did with that information, and here's a response to your concerns. It's iterative. It's iterative, and it's over and over. And by doing that, we permitted 90 million square feet of new development. I mean, sometimes I walk around, in Boston, I look at a project, and I said, I never thought in a million years we'd get to yes on that. But more often than not, we did get to yes on even the most difficult challenges. And now when I think, and I've had a few conversations now about FS1, the fire station, I mean, that's a really difficult political problem that the town faces right now. But I'm really convinced, not having been part of that conversation yet, that listening to people, identifying the problems, and crafting a solution through multiple sessions of engagement can get us to yes. And that's not just true of FS1, but probably true of, other development issues that are going to come along for the town of Westwood over the next several years.
Thank you. I'm going to turn the next question over to Mary Ann.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Golden. How would you go about assessing Westwood's organizational structures, its systems, and its resident satisfaction levels?
So, from the outside looking in, I can't emphasize this enough. To the outsider, Westwood appears to be nirvana. It is a very well-run town, and that is objectively clear. That's not really a subjective call. You look at the fiscal financial situation, I've never seen anything like it. And I've talked to other CFOs in other towns who've never really seen anything like this. The measures of health, financially and fiscally, are pretty profound. Property tax revenue, free cash, stabilization, overlay, debt. The town's debt is right in the sweet spot that the rating agencies like to see, 6.5%. By every objectively clear sort of quantitative measure, this town is healthy. Then you look over at the schools. The schools are fabulous. They're a magnet. So many of my peers growing up in the city or in Westwood, because close to Boston, great schools, high quality of life. So, police, fire, first responder, quality of the public works, the roads, the transportation at work, the water and the sewer. It's really strong, I think. But when I familiarize myself with the FS1 story, there's a disconnect here, right? There's something going on with town perceptions, residents' perceptions of decisions being made on that matter. There's a lot of pushback to the override. It's not just pushback, it was the debt exclusion was defeated twice within a couple months of each other. So it's getting into the weeds on a matter like that, I think will teach me an awful lot about where people perceive the problem, and then it gives me, as the agent of the board, something to respond to, really think about, and craft a means of communicating that hopefully settles folks down and allays concerns, because there's a concern out there, and I don't know enough about is it just FS1? What is it that ails people? What is it that concerns them about how decisions are being made on that matter, and whether or not that is characteristic elsewhere? What's interesting is when I think about the debt exclusion, the town has been really receptive historically to debt exclusions. Of the past 17, 15 have passed. So I am really interested as a public policy problem, but also a civic culture problem. What has gone wrong here that has resulted in two consecutive defeats on that? I think it will tell me a lot about the civic culture and how I and the town leadership should be communicating with the people who are going to be, are or maybe the collective boss of us all. So, I'm sorry.
No, as a follow-up to that, what would be your plan for the first 100 days on the job?
So, select board, collective chief executive, administrator agent of the select board for purposes of executing the policy that is determined, as well as the law that governs the town. So, the first order of business is really understanding what you think. We are meeting each other for the very first time tonight, and I need to understand individually how you view the town, how you view the challenges, and what exactly you expect me and the senior staff and the entire bureaucracy of the town to do about it. It's a substantive question. Where do you see the priorities? And then how do you expect me to communicate with you about them? Obviously, there's limitations, open meeting law, how we can communicate as a group versus individually, but we can communicate individually. And I'd like to understand, A, what are the matters that you feel I need to focus on? How do you want me to go about those tasks? How do you want me to communicate with you and give you feedback? What's the cadence? What's the frequency of the communication and the nature of that communication that you expect to see from me? So that would be foundational. Obviously, a lot of time with the department heads. I've already begun the conversation a couple hours ago with some members of the town's leadership team to listen to their concerns and their priorities. So first and foremost, it's the select board, it's senior leadership in the town departments, and then it's really getting out into the community and listening firsthand. The beauty, back to scale, the beauty of a town like this is it is relatively small, and it does give me an opportunity to connect with people on an individualized basis and a small group basis to really understand what the concerns are and the challenges that they see, and that will be productive for me. It'll be productive for the staff of the agency. It'll be productive in my conversations with you all. The most important thing, I think, by far, is as a specific matter, FS1 is occupying a lot of attention and time, rightfully so. It's a really key function of the town. But also, it's not too distant. I'd argue it's actually right here, the issue of money and finances. Today, things are really healthy, but we know that in an era where Prop 2.5 limits your ability to dedicate revenue to town priorities, the 2.5 cap is real. It's a problem for everyone. But you've also got really modest, really limited growth. You've had a really impressive success as a town associated with University Station and the new growth that flowed from that, as well as some other things. But the new growth number has been pretty healthy in Westwood for a while, and it's beginning to diminish. So how do you make up for that new growth revenue that you need to embed in your tax base for the years to come? That needs to be focused upon right now, and I'm sure it is. But I think that my experience in Boston associated with new growth, which really was our business in many ways, can lend itself to sort of a constructive role in that subject here. And that has to be immediate.
If I could ask one more follow-up on that. You talked about being an agent of the board. Your experience has been largely as a policymaker, as a legislator in the State House, as the director of a major agency, now on the Newton City Council. What is your comfort level in changing roles to a role like town administrator?
I think there's more overlap than not. First of all, the experience dealing at a substantive level and in a substantive role with federal issues, state issues, a variety of city and state bureaucracies that are brought to bear on development issues in Boston. When you think of the multiplicity of agencies that go into every major, planning and development decision, it's everything. So you've got, it has presented me with an opportunity to understand systems and functions performed by a variety of state and city agencies and even federal agencies that can have an impact on Westwood. So understanding who's out there and what they do, what the mechanisms are that need to be reached out, that you need to reach out and touch, whether it's the Department of Transportation or the MBTA, or even when you think of town services, veteran services. I was regional administrator for the Department of Health and Human Services, which is primary function is Medicaid, and Medicaid impacts absolutely every community in this country, and my role was here in New England. So all of those things help me think about problems and address problems in a town, whether it's Westwood or anywhere else. But my time at the agency is very similar in many ways to a town administrator's job. At the Redevelopment Authority, I was the CEO. We had a $75 million budget by the time I left. Not that far off the Westwood budget, which is 130 plus. And I had a staff of 250 people on average. Not that big a difference when you excise the school department, which is run by the superintendent. But when you look at the rest of the municipal staff, about the same number. You look at how one manages a town and how I manage the Boston Redevelopment Authority. It's a CFO, it's a general counsel, it's the major sort of service functionaries or program functionaries. We had a large planning department, we had a large development review department, we had a large IT department, we had a real estate management department. The BRA owns over 20 million square feet of property, both structures and land, concentrated at the Charlestown Navy Yard, some in downtown Boston, and the bulk of it over at the Marine Industrial Park near the seaport. So I'm managing capital issues too. I'm managing a capital budget and significant maintenance costs and deferred maintenance that had a really frightening price tag associated with it of about $250 million when I became chief executive. So whether we're talking about, the agency's operating budget or its capital budget, its need to take on debt, to bond debt, to take care of our property, to manage 200 50 people to accomplish really important tasks. The overlap, there is more symmetry than not, I think, in my role at the BRA when compared to the town administrator's role.
Thank you. Joe, why don't you take a turn with some?
Sure. Brian, I'm going to drill down. First of all, thank you for your service to our country.
Thank you.
Rob beat me to the punch, but it's not the first time. I'm going to drill down a little more specifically. Tell me a little bit about how many direct reports, I'm going to guess, we're going to look at the senior staff. How many direct reports did you have at the BRA?
So a couple different times we had management consultants come in when I took over because we're looking at the agency's history, its structure. Are we prepared for, our role that we've entered, well into the 21st century? And sometimes the criticism was I had too many direct reports. I had 10. I think the sweet spot often for a CEO is smaller than that. I stuck with the 10 because I thought the agency's history of having not as much contact at a senior level or at a junior level with the CEO was a real problem, and I had to shift culture. I had to actually gain the trust and confidence of my subordinates on senior staff, but also make sure they were hearing directly from me. I didn't think there was a compelling reason why I needed to reduce that number, but I basically had 10 of the 12 senior-most staffers report directly to me.
Okay. And I'm interested in your style. How often did you meet with them? And how did you meet with them?
So almost always, up until the pandemic, I met in person. There was no such thing as remote or hybrid. This was the case sort of society-wide. Pre-2020, I met with them personally as a group twice a week.
Okay, let's back up for a second. You met with them one-on-one, or you met with them as a group?
As a group.
As a group. And how often did you meet with them one-on-one?
So one-on-one the CFO was every week, one-on-one. The general counsel was every week, one-on-one. The chief of staff had a very, really impressive, competent chief of staff who I met with every single day, not surprisingly, given the role. And I would meet with the the director of development and the director of planning once a week individually. So if you look at it, 2 group settings, because that's all about sharing information that is appropriate for all and giving people the opportunity to deconflict, because planning agency, planning department, development department sometimes don't see eye to eye, and it's important for all of us to have eyes on the situation and help deconflict. I thought it was remarkably effective and completely foreign given the recent history of the organization. Things like that didn't happen. And then we started embedding people in each other's discussions. So whether there was a planning activity or exercise going on, or a development review process going on with a development proposal, we had people from both of those major nodes within the agency embedded with each other. So the deconflicting's going on, project by project, planning exercise by planning exercise, but it's also moving up to my level if there remains sort of outstanding issues. And by bringing it to my level too, that also gives me the opportunity to bring it to the mayoral level if necessary.
Okay, so the 5 or 6 positions you mentioned you would meet once per week?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that is.
And when did you meet with them one-on-one, other than your chief of staff?
I'm sorry, no, one-on-one for all of those. In addition, we all met, all 10.
Okay, Okay.
twice. So it'd be two big group settings, usually on a Tuesday and on a Friday, beginning of the week and the end of the week. This is what's, conversation number one is this is what's coming up. And conversation number two in the week was this is what just happened. And we got to think about it as we head into the new week. But the individuals, you don't want to get bogged down in an hour conversation with the CFO if everybody doesn't need to be in that conversation. Same with the GC, the general counsel, and the planning and development. Sometimes the planning and development would be two with me, because those were the most significant nodes of activity. And then all important, the real estate development unit, that would often be one-on-one with me, because they're managing our property, and the BRA's revenue all comes from ground leases. It's not appropriated funds, there's no property tax revenue. It all comes from ground leases on the property that we own and manage.
Thank you, I'm set.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. So whomever comes into this role will be doing so at a very important time and a challenging time of the year. We'll be amidst fiscal '27 planning. As you touched on before, we've got FS1 that needs to move forward and needs to move forward with some urgency. We've got, multiple collective bargaining sessions going on with the various units, and we're beginning a longer-term facilities mapping and planning for, capital needs. So describe your project management approach and how you would balance your time in oversight of what I'll call the important versus the urgent.
So my time at City Hall, I think, would be somewhat illustrative of the approach I take with regard to prioritization. At the same time, the really compelling priorities are never the only things that need to be done. It is the day in, day out, sometimes mundane functions, but are all important. They must all get attention. Back to my methodology with regard to talking to senior staff, it was to make sure that both things were occurring. Senior matters, I think, are those that would be communicated to me by my board at times. They might be things communicated to me by the mayor, and it might all be a result of my helping shape them. These are what I see as the priorities. I would expect that the really compelling needs, the urgent, are being communicated to me by you, by the board, whether in formal session or in the conversations that go on throughout the weeks and months, in between board sessions. I think you meet twice a month. Is that correct?
Largely, yeah.
So, but there are some things that are very obvious. Again, it's FS1, it's revenue issues, and revenue issues go hand in hand with development issues, because growth is where you get a modest increment and embed those numbers in your tax base going forward. It is what makes everything else in the town work. Every single department is dependent on getting that right. So you've got the hierarchy of values. Here are the really important things. They are constantly being revisited with the select board for proper emphasis, proper prioritization. And then at the granular level, the rank and file staff are working matters, pushing difficulties and challenges up to their senior staff, which are being presented in those sessions that I just described weekly, the two. The always informing this is there are sometimes mundane, basic operations that need to be dealt with. That is just a constant of the universe, and you would rely on your department heads to be operating those levers and moving things to the town administrator for movement to the select board as necessary when those things happen. But I would say the critical matters are the ones that I'm spending most of my time on. That's money, that's capital. Those are the things that animate not just the select board, but the town's residents. You're hearing from them on a constant basis. You're ultimately being evaluated at election time. So I think it's hugely important that I'm getting the prioritization from you and using the structure that I just sort of described as the means of addressing it.
Thank you. Mary Ann?
Thank you. In a town like Westwood, communication and collaboration between departments is crucial, as with our boards and committees. How would you ensure and enhance communication, collaboration, and building consensus among those that are members of the team, particularly on difficult issues?
So the approach I think I've adopted historically is a management style of walking around, and that means that I plug myself into a variety of forums where my work has an impact. It may be a unit within the agency. By the way, we had a lot of boards. We had a civic design board. We had sort of voluntary appointments of residents of Boston who would serve on different boards. So there's that. But there's also other city agencies that weren't mine, weren't within my agency. And my attitude was get involved in absolutely everything that we have influence upon, that we have an effect upon. And to the extent that we can add value to that, great. To the extent that those entities can add value to the work that we were doing, that was all good. So I would say that the town administrator in an environment this size does have the opportunity and ability, I'm imagining, to participate in lots of different sort of, entities that are staffed by town employees, and lots of different entities that are staffed by residents, volunteers, and other kinds of civic organizations, so that the administrator is in fact the linchpin. The administrator can be involved in all of this and help deconflict and harmonize competing wants and needs, not just within town government, but within the community at large. And I think that my time at City Hall was characterized by a constant presence so that I could directly understand and directly communicate both with my staff as well as outside entities what our perspectives were on important matters.
Joe?
Thank you, Rob. Brian, you have filled some major shoes in your career, which is very impressive. I'm going to broaden this a little bit, but when you first started I'm going to give you the option. Let's say at the Boston Planning, general counsel at the sheriff's office, in the military, when you stepped into a role in any of those organizations, I always like to kind of sit back and see how things are going, but sometimes that doesn't always work. Give me an example of when you stepped into those shoes, into an organization, and you recognized immediately that something had to be done, that you could not wait for that honeymoon period.
My apologies.
And we don't need to know the details. I'm just looking for an example.
So I am trying to think of matters that are appropriate for this conversation as opposed to.
I said in the beginning, you have filled some big shoes.
So when I got to the when I got to City Hall, it's 2008, 2009. Mayor Menino is still is heading into his last term. He's reelected he's reelected as mayor in 2009. Serves another full term. So also is in the middle of an election when I joined that summer. There I think I'm going to back off that one.
Well, I will be honest, if it's a situation that you cannot comment on, I'm perfectly fine with that as well.
Yeah, thank
I
you.
appreciate your introspection, and we can leave it at that.
I wish
Given it's a public meeting.
I'm sorry, everything that is going through my head right now
Sure.
is pretty sensitive, and
I understand.
I'm
That's fine.
I'm
We
not sure I have
appreciate
a
your discretion, and if
comfort
that
level.
is something at some point, Joe, you would like to follow up with, I'm sure that
I'm not sure I
Brian
want to,
would- Well,
perhaps.
when in your opening, you alluded to the challenges of Prop 2.5, and like many municipalities, we face tremendous budget pressures like everyone else. And like so many places, we have a generally exhausted tax base of residents. So how will you balance sources and uses of funds to maintain the high level of services that you alluded to in your opening, that residents of Westwood have come to know and expect?
So, looking at the past several years, as well as the current FY, and you're going to start developing a budget end of
We're in
this
it.
year, early
Yeah.
next year, setting the tax rate. I think you've had a vote, but tax rate will be set sometime in the next few weeks.
Monday?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Again, the picture is one of really extraordinary discipline and farsightedness with regard to not only how you're handling the property taxes within the levy limit, but also again the free cash, the stabilization fund allows you to withstand some pressures going forward, but they're finite. I mean, by definition, you can't use them for recurring needs well into the future. As healthy and as ample as they are now, they are not the solution for the long term. The long term is expansion of the tax base and creation of new growth opportunities. And
If I could double click on that just a little bit, I'm interested in your thoughts on economic development, specifically in trying to balance, the need for sustainable revenue through expanded commercial, while balancing that against the desire to maintain the character and charm and integrity of the community that you had came in admiring from the outside.
So, Mr. Chairman, for all that the town has going for it, that's a really serious challenge because the economic development opportunities often butt heads with the expectations of the town. And it's not just by looking at it, it's overwhelmingly single fam. And if it's not single fam, it's a whole lot of open space. Nobody really has an appetite, it appears, to adjust it that much. If you look at the comprehensive plan from 2020, the comprehensive plan, tested some concepts with the public, and you had over 800 people, which is a good number for a town of this size, respond and tell the planners what they wanted to see happen with regard to land use in the future of the city. And it's resoundingly want to keep the residential character as it is, want to keep the open space, and you're dealing with less than 10% of the land mass as potential commercial industrial development. Now, you've got tremendous bang for the buck out of University Station. That is fabulous for lots of reasons, above and beyond the expansion of the tax base. But that new growth revenue that flowed from University Station is beginning to peter out, correct? You've always been well over, I think, $1.5 million of new growth revenue coming into the town, and primarily as a result of that. Now it's below $1 million, and it's not just, you're just not losing that for that year. You're losing it forever,
Right.
because now it's not in the base, and it is the gift that keeps on giving when it shows up. So how do you get the public to understand new growth is probably the best way to handle this if there isn't an appetite for a continuous series of overrides, and there isn't an appetite for a reduction in the high-quality services that characterize this town? I would like to think that with the passage of time, there has to be an acceptance that there has to be some change, not wholesale, but some. For instance, is there more to be done at University Station? It is sort of built out, but I think there is a consensus among some who've looked at it that it could be more dense than it is. There could be more at University Station than is there. There's also industrial properties nearby that probably lend themselves to future development opportunities. They're still being used for an industrial use today, but what about tomorrow, and what about a couple of years from now, as we look to prime the pump for new growth opportunities? I'm hoping that from a sort of strategic focus on certain nodes within that 6 or 7% of the town land mass that is currently zoned commercial industrial, that there are opportunities in there. But will there also be opportunities to visit, land parcels beyond those? Maybe, this is there's an old line that, everybody wants to go to heaven, but nobody wants to die. There will have to be trade-offs. There have to be changes when you look at the menu of options. Which do you choose? Service cuts? Do you choose continuous overrides? Or do you choose new growth? You can hope that efficiencies can be achieved that will allow you to duck those questions, but probably not. Probably not the level of efficiencies and sort of cost shaving that will address the need. And it's not, the federal government isn't coming to infuse new cash. Unlikely the state is either. I mean, you look at Chapter 70, you look at Chapter 90, you look at unrestricted aid. It's all important. It's all a piece of the solution, but it's probably not going to address the long-term needs of the town. So I don't know how the story ends, and where the balance is struck among those options, but it will have to be wrestled with. There's no denying that.
Thank you.
Staying with the financial topic, our tax base is one pie from which we must accommodate all of the municipal needs as well as the school needs. With that in mind, what would be your approach to budget building? And particularly, how would you work with the schools to ensure that we are maintaining our sustainable levels of service?
So, if you look at the per capita spend by Westwood on the schools, it's pretty healthy. And you look at the results, very healthy. It's, well more than a majority of the town's spending is on these schools, as it should be. This is why families come here for those schools. So if you look at the budget as it is and look at the health of the revenue going forward, it is that spending is sustainable for the foreseeable. There is always the wrestling with Chapter 70. The legislature has been very focused on this under the current governor. I mean, there has been some improvements in recent years on local aid, and those are a part of the solution going forward. But the Education Reform Act in '93, carved out so much authority for school committees and superintendents. Prior to that, it was a crazy quilt of approaches to funding education and to governing. One municipality was not like the other, but the Education Reform Act of '93 did exchange, certain controls, certain structures in place to, arguably depoliticize to an extent some of the decisions. They're made by the school committee, made by the school superintendent, and then ultimately the budget approved over here by the select board in the town meeting. So it does bring you right back to that, the question about growth. Because if there is going to be a constraint on school funding and the per capita sum that is spent on children in Westwood, it's only going to be addressed the same route. You've got some Chapter 70 money, but by and large, it's going to be funded by the town, and that means the town is going to have to find the additional revenue source to support it at current levels. And there's no getting around the fact that while the numbers are healthy today, the per capita spending's healthy today, the school budget overall is healthy, that there'll be a day of reckoning associated with new growth.
Joe, before you go, I'm just looking at the time. We're at the bottom of the hour now. So I'm going to sort of give one more question to you, Joe, and then I want to give Brian an opportunity if he has a question on his mind for us. So, Joe.
Yeah, I'll make it quick. Thanks, Rob. Brian, what direction, what direction did you give your direct reports as far as reevaluating policies or assets that you have? What I mean is, I'm sure when you were at the city, you had assets that you had sat on for many years. How often did you compile a list, or have someone compile a list and say, do we need all of these assets?
Assets being our property.
Hard property, yep.
Yep. So, first order of business, I guess I have to acknowledge, When I took the job, there was no comprehensive list of everything we owned. It didn't exist. There are records of the things the agency owned. We could cobble it together, but you could not go anywhere and find a document that told you everything we owned. So, first order of business, cobble it together, figure out what we own. Because again, some of the owning was slivers of property left over from older urban renewal projects in the 60s when the agency did an eminent domain taking, may have conveyed a parcel to a developer, but not all of it. There were slivers all over the city of Boston left over from urban renewal. So when you think of the complexities there, someone wants to develop and finds a little triangle owned by the Boston Redevelopment Authority in the middle of, the theater district. You got an issue. So we conducted an inventory. That was a lot of looking through old parchment-type papers from the 60s, assembling everything we own, everything that was left over from something that was conveyed, and then the big things, Charlestown Navy Yard, Marine Industrial Park. And not only that, we identified what we owned and we put it on online. It's the BRA-owned land database, BOLD. And you can go on BOLD now and see everything we own, from a parcel, sliver, remnant, to one of the biggest buildings in Boston, the over in the Marine Industrial Park, the Innovation and Design Center, which is the home of Reebok. So, first order of business, what do we own? Second, what isn't leased that should be leased? And there was a lot that had not been leased. But with the increasing development of the seaport, a lot of interest in the Marine Industrial Park and a lot more interest in leasing. So we were able to start doing much better lease deals. Some of the property was vacant, some of it undervalued, some of the leases were pennies on the dollar. We worked these leases to get them performing at a better level. It's why our budget went from 36 million to 75 million in 8 years. And then we sold parcels off for housing. But it was a, for housing and some other, in other activities, but it was first and foremost, it's pretty primitive. We had to figure out what we owned, and then, do we want to hold it? Do we want to convey it? Do we want to do a ground lease? And what is the nature of the development that we would like to see on our land that we might ground lease? So a very complicated and time-consuming endeavor that really spanned a couple of years, but the agency was doing a lot of major things at once. We're doing a brand-new city plan. We're overseeing pent-up demand for permitting of major real estate development coming off the 08-09 recession and financial crisis. By 13, 14, the city's really firing on all cylinders again. But then it's also sort of figuring out what we're going to do with our own property. So there's these three major activities going, and it was key to deploy staff and agency resources to get all of that done simultaneously. I always say it's like fixing an airplane engine while it's in flight, because we had too many complicated things going on, but I think we also rose to the occasion, given the extremely strong capabilities of the staff of the organization.
But did you set up a schedule to do that periodically, or was it a one-shot review? Did you say, in 10 years, we're going to do this again?
Yeah, no, that was a continuous, arduous process that would have been a really important part of the structure for communication that I outlined a little earlier. That bold, identifying parcels and what we should do with them, was one of the primary conversations that was occurring in these twice a week conversations that was going on with me and senior staff.
So you were essentially saying that you planned the work through that inventory exercise, and then you continued to work the plan.
Absolutely. And we didn't even actually have a real estate manager. We owned 20 million square feet.
Yep.
We didn't have a real estate manager. So we first of all had to create a department whose sole function was our real estate. It didn't exist. It was handled by different people in different silos.
Yeah.
It's very strange. But we had to create the structure.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna cut this part of the
I'm sorry.
conversation. No, that's okay.
Rob,
we-
just
we-
for the
we
record,
are-
though, I'd like to acknowledge the fact that he was able to answer Joe's question number 2. Thank you.
Could I ask him one more, Rob?
Yes.
If I could ask you to answer this briefly, Mr. Golden. One area of town services that we haven't alluded to tonight is in the area of human services, which is a very important part of the service we provide. Our prior town administrator created a human rights task force. Can you speak very briefly to your experience in that area and how you would prioritize that work?
Given my experience at Boston City Hall, I would say human services, from an economic standpoint, from a financial standpoint, do not get as much attention by any stretch of the imagination at a municipal level as they do at the state and the federal. So when I was at regional administrator at the Department of Health and Human Services, that's Medicaid and Medicare, but it's also the Administration for Children and Families, which funds an awful lot of state activity. So I ended up working closely with state and city municipalities on issues associated with childcare, Head Start, which is funded by the federal government, and the administration on aging. All of these entities at the federal level have trickled down because the operations aren't going on at the federal level. That's about distributing money for certain programs. The rubber meets the road at the local level, whether through nonprofits or through, town efforts like senior centers, veterans service coordinators, and child and family services, mental health counseling. So while my experience was both federal and state, because the state legislature is spending an awful lot of time at this, I have spent a disproportionate share of my life. I think we've talked a lot about development and planning experience, but prior to that, a whole lot of my world was human services in the legislature and at the Department of Health and Human Services. And I think I'd bring a fine eye toward that function at the municipal level because I just don't think it gets the attention it deserves almost anywhere, but it's mostly because of the money issues. The big programmatic money is in other things.
Thank you.
Closing comments and.
Please. We'll let you make some closing comments. Is there anything in your closing comments that you want to make sure the three of us know about you and what the residents might want to know?
No, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And again, through you to the members, I've appreciated the opportunity to have a conversation this evening. I fully accept and appreciate that my candidacy for the position is non-traditional. I'm not a town manager. I've never been a town manager, and I haven't been an assistant town manager. I don't come up through those ranks. But I have run an organization that featured a lot of common activities. There were a lot of common aspects to the organization I ran at Boston City Hall that would create a degree of symmetry with what happens in a town manager's role. So whether it's a CFO, whether it's overseeing a general counsel, whether it's overseeing a variety of programs, a variety of services, that was going on in my role at the Boston Redevelopment Authority in a similar fashion to the way it would occur in a town. But I think where I add value, that may be unusual is in the economic development realm. And when you think of, I don't want to overstate it, it's not an existential threat, but it is a threat to the quality of life and the identity of this community. The reason why people move here is if its fiscal and financial health was compromised. And that has been protected for a long time, but we are going into a different era with regard to municipal finance. And I think that the experience I had at Boston City Hall lends itself to identifying key places where you can generate new growth. And that is the force that unlocks a lot of the potential to protect, your outlays for the services and programs that make this community such a desirable place to live. So I respectfully ask for your consideration, and I have certainly appreciated the opportunity to speak with you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much for being here. We're going to take a
Pleasure.
quick 5-minute break and get ready for the next candidate. Take it away with an introduction, please.
All right, very good. Happy to introduce you to your second candidate tonight, Joe Powers. Joe is, again, he's made it through the screening process and was selected by the screening committee as being one of the candidates they wanted you to have an experience to speak with. So I will turn it over to the board.
Well, welcome, Joe. We are happy to have you here, and on behalf of my colleagues and I and the broader community, thank you for your interest in serving as our next town administrator. This next hour, we're a couple minutes behind, so we'll make sure that you get your fair share of time, is meant to help you get to know us and for us to get to know a whole lot more about you and what your interest is in our community and overall your qualifications to serve as our next town administrator. So we're going to invite you to make some opening remarks, and then we will round robin some questions to you in areas that are of particular interest to us and of the community. So with that, the floor is yours, sir.
Well, thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. I'm thrilled to be a part of this, to be here tonight and to have gone through the process. So I come before you this evening as an avowed government geek, somebody that started out in government as a school committee representative way back in high school. And that's where I learned the wonderful concept of parliamentary procedure, Robert's Rules of Order, and all the fun that brings. But that was really my introduction to government. And then I was fortunate soon after high school, while I was a college student studying political science and public administration, to actually get elected into office. So there is sort of a tale of three people, if you will, or three facets of my life. The first part of my adult life, I was an elected official. I served in several elected positions in my hometown of Braintree: school committee, moderator, town clerk, and select board. And during that time, I was in corporate banking. And then after 2008 and the recession, corporate banking went away. And then I transitioned into the world of appointed government. And that's where I've been since 2009. The majority of that time as town clerk. Back in 2017, as we clerks used to say, I went to the dark side. 2018, went to the dark side, and that was administration. So I had an opportunity in Wellfleet to be the assistant town administrator / town clerk. I did that for a year, and then the assistant town administrator position opened up in my hometown of Harwich. I went for it. And then a whole bunch of things happened over the last 6 years, and I'll save my time to get into those stories as we talk about administration and all that. But again, excited to be here, grateful to have made it to this part of the round, and very excited to meet you folks, learn about Westwood, and hopefully give you a better sense of who I am and what I can bring to the table.
Why, thank you. So you talked about being, having experience on both sides of this table,
Yes,
right?
yes.
So how have those experiences informed your leadership style? And can you give some examples of when you led a team through a particular challenging time in a community?
So I can tell you over 36 years, could be a number of different things that I could draw upon to answer the second part of that question. What I think is probably the best example is I was new in the job in Harwich as the assistant town administrator, even though I'd lived there for, at that time, 5 years. I didn't know the community because I lived there, but I worked somewhere else. And we had the tornado, as we call it. And nothing gets you, your attention more than a weather event like that. So as the assistant town administrator, new to the job, didn't really know what my job was. Well, it was an emergency, and so my job was to provide the leadership to the town administrator, certainly, but this is while the storm was happening. And so, as it turned out, the administrator was in a separate part of the building, and so I was the one that had to corral everybody and keep them safe and keep them calm during the storm. And then when the storm passed, and we found out that, on the one hand, there was the blessing of no fatalities, no injuries, but significant property damage, then it changed into something different. Then it was, okay, now we're going to use our skills in procurement to make sure we're doing emergency procurements right, to make sure we get the resources that are out there. So, that's the first one that comes to mind. But the examples of being on both sides of the table, as it were, I have and will always draw upon my understanding as a 6-year member of school committee, what it means to advocate for education, for public education and public government, while trying to balance the other side of government. Moderator, I learned so much about town meeting. When you are the presiding officer of that legislative body, you really get to understand town meeting. And as the moderator, I was the one responsible for appointing the personnel board, the finance committee, the government study committee. And so, again, I think, if memory serves correctly, there was also a 5-year stint where a tremendous amount of experience. For me, however, the biggest growth has been in administration, because in that you have to do human resources, which is also personnel, and I like to distinguish between the two. Human resources really is when we're trying to support the person in the role, and personnel is more when you have to do the more difficult equation on that, whether it's performance review or reprimands and things of that nature, and then procurement itself. And so in each of those things that I can draw upon, scores of examples of stepping up when the moment called for it, something that you didn't necessarily expect or had been trained for. So that's really what I draw upon. But for me, for leading people, it's knowing that there's a muscle memory, if you will, that comes with those years of experience in leadership, where you don't know what's going to come next. You know something's going to happen, whether it's a budget crisis or whether it's a weather event or it's something in the community, whether there's a tragedy or otherwise. Those are the things that I've learned, that there's an innateness that comes with that, and that's the culmination of 3 decades in government.
And so, you cited the tornado, and that certainly is a great example of responding to crisis in the moment.
Sure.
Talk about any experience you have where we have many issues that we're trying to navigate through conflict to produce a positive and productive outcome. Can you cite an example where you've been able to, navigate conflict successfully to produce a positive and productive outcome?
I do. I think one of the things I draw upon is, and again, when I came into Harwich, the plan for me was to be an assistant town administrator for 5 years. That was my goal. I wanted to learn everything I could about human resources from the administration standpoint, procurement from the administration standpoint, and certainly learning from a seasoned veteran town administrator on what it would take to run a town. As my dad says, man plans, God laughs. 2 weeks before I was starting, I was at town meeting because I'm a resident and a voter there, and I sat in that auditorium, and the operating budget for the town in 2019 failed. I was shocked to see that. It had failed because when it came to a rising vote, even though it's a select board budget that was built by the administrator, 2 members of the select board stood up in opposition. Even though that process, so right away, there was a special kind of conflict that I was not aware of. But as a moderator, and I will tell you, I think there is such a thing known as moderator's ear. When the moderator called the vote, I heard it as a failure. I talked to him later on, and he did too, but he called it in favor. And so what happened was more than 7 people rose. And so in the end, the budget passed, I think, by 35 votes because it was a hand count at that point. But we were looking at, 2 weeks before I was starting, of staring down the barrel of a 1/12 budget. Something that I had studied, something I had known about, but something we didn't have to put it into effect before. Now, the irony in all that is a year later, we have COVID, and we were all doing the 1/12 budget. So my point on that is, it was a stark understanding of, I mean, for me, the warrant is done, the budget's done, you've gotten to that point, it's the select board's budget, and it's almost torpedoed right at the beginning on the first night. So 6 months later, the board separated the administrator from his role. They told me I was now going to be the acting administrator. And they made it a point to say, we don't want to have an example like that again. And so I took that to heart. One of the things I'm most proud of in my time in Harwich is that I was a part of, directly a part as administrator of 6 annual town meetings and 2 special town meetings, which in Harwich, they are special. They don't have them all the time. They're not regular. And I will tell you that it is a fact to say that I and we were undefeated. And that is to say there was never an issue with the budget during my tenure. There was never an issue with the capital budget. There were massive projects that came along. You know, I've said it before to the group. When you talk on the Cape, you don't talk about sewer, you talk about wastewater. That's the genteel way we say it, but everyone on the Cape is dealing with that. So during my tenure, we were able to go through the entire process of procurement for first a $26 million phase, then a $56 million phase, and before I left, a $38 million phase. And so all of that was sound procurement that gave the board comfort that we could do it. It was the borrowing process. Proud to say that I was the administrator for 2 bond rating calls that resulted in AAA bond ratings. But more than that, what I take from that is I was able to establish a rapport with town meeting. I take it very seriously. I love that form of government, and we were successful. So anything that the board wanted to get done during my tenure, we were successful at town meeting. And I think you do that by everyday actions, but also great speech making, if you will, and great communication and marketing, for lack of a better word. And so, you know, the first go-round of the 24 million that my boss worked on came in at 26 million. So that's one of the things that got him displaced. So I inherited that, and then 2 years later, when we wanted to do, or had to do 56 million, I need to make sure I did it right. So those are examples where it started out, I think, in strife and in doubt, and it went well. And so it's because I was able to work through our processes, able to work with the moderator-appointed finance committee, you know, a little bit of a tussle there, if you will, legislative versus executive, teamed with administration. But in the end, success. You know, success with big projects, and not just success at town meeting, as you know, success at the ballot. And those are things I'm proud of. So for the 8 town meetings that I was a part of, we were undefeated.
Thank you. Mary Ann?
Good evening, Mr. Powers. How would you go about assessing Westwood's organizational structures, our systems, and resident levels of satisfaction?
So how would I go about it? I've been doing that as my due diligence, if you will. I think I've been doing that. So I've gone over your charter extensively. I had the opportunity, as the other candidates would have, to meet with your executive function group. I love the concept of that. And so I see a strong organizational structure. I see that you have a commitment to key roles where your ATAs are human resources and finance. You can rely upon your ATA to be the interim. So your organization, to me, is solid. What I think I'm witnessing, and when I say that, I tell the story of Dottie all the time. I tried to sneak into your October meeting for FS1, the community engagement, which what I see from a distance is the town, you folks, your staff are doing the right thing. Your procurement was solid on FS1. I would have recommended you did the second ballot because you had the vendors that were holding their prices. Like, that's sound business practices. But there's a disconnect with the community. So I'm not able to get the flavor yet myself, because I haven't lived through it. I sat through that evening, and there was certainly, I think, a a lot of great comments that were made. I think there was a great level of decorum despite a feeling of frustration, I think on all sides. You know, we want to get the project done. So I think for me to gauge it, if I'm your administrator, I want to make sure I'm out there at every level of the community. I've seen that you have service organizations like Rotary Club and others. Those are great groups for me to interact with, faith-based groups and charitable groups. If there are civic associations, I didn't have a chance to sneak into your Westwood Day, but, you know, community events and things like that, being out and about. But I definitely, I know there's an inflection point for Westwood. You have a critical project that your team, the chief did a great articulation of what the program needs are, but you're not able to get it passed to the voters. Now, one of the things I think I heard during the comments, and I apologize, they're jumbling. I've watched your annual town meeting. I watched a lot of your meetings about FS1, some of the community meetings you had. And I think I've heard, you know, with the capital projects, there are folks that are looking for a statement of priorities. That's something I can help you with. That's something I had to do in Harwich. In Harwich, the administrator, even with a finance director, has to build the budget, and it's a comprehensive budget. It's the capital budget, so we have a 5-year plan. So I don't know if I'm getting to the heart of the question about how I would read it, if that's what the question was. But it's, to an earlier question, it's one of the things that intrigues me. I'm not looking to come into a quiet town, you know, per se. I want to be able to add immediate value. And so I hope I've gotten to the essence of your question.
You have,
All
thank
right.
you.
Thank you.
Joe?
And I have to add, I'm under strict orders to be succinct, and I don't know that word. I know it, but I just
You're
can't do
doing
it.
just fine. Joe?
Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Joe, quick question. How many, 2 questions. How many direct reports do you have in your current position?
So I am no longer the administrator in Harwich, so it will be my last, my former position, if you will, so when I left at the end of June.
Or had?
In the charter, I think the number is 22, but my direct report meetings, it was more along the lines of 27, because we included the deputy chiefs, some assistant department heads that were critical, but a little bit unwieldy. And so what I did when I was there is my assistant town administrator, wonderful person and a wonderful assistant town administrator, she's no longer with the town. I had her, she has a regulatory background, so I had her working with what we call community development, not this exact same structure that you have, but it wasn't as formal for us. But I had her be a primary point of contact for day-to-day questions to expedite things on building, health, conservation, those groups. However, I want to be clear, that was not to then relinquish my ownership and my responsibilities for that group. In Harwich, the big 4, so the town administrator, finance director, police chief, and fire chief are all appointed by the select board. So that was a peer group, but they were included in my direct report, so they were included in that number of 22. I made sure to have regular department head meetings, as we called them. I think it's more like your executive function group where it's the senior managers. And then I did really function-based more regularly. So human services, community development, recreation, and social services, and things of that nature.
Let me follow up with that. So it sounds like primarily there were 4 direct reports. I'm going to say the fire chief, police chief, finance.
Those are direct reports of the select board, of which I was one.
Okay.
So aside from them, I had 22.
Okay. How often did you meet with them one-on-one? Or who did you meet with one-on-one?
So I made it a point to meet with all of my direct reports one-on-one for the purposes of goal setting and reviews and all that. I tried to make it a point to be out and about management by walking around. So getting out to their operations without looming, without micromanaging per se. But more than that, I employed an open door policy. I've used the phrase of go see Joe. I wanted my directs to know that if they needed me, the door was always open. My team would always get them in front of me. Otherwise, I was out in their organizations and their in the field with them as needed. It was really, though, an offshoot of the monthly meetings,
Thank
where
you.
we build off of that.
Now, if you steal that, you have to pay him a royalty, you know that, right? Go see Joe? Okay. Obviously, the new town administrator is going to be arriving here at a really critical time of year.
Sure.
Right? We're going to be in the midst of FY '27 budget planning. We have FS1, as you talked about. We have multiple municipal collective bargaining in process, and we have the long-term facilities discussions, to just name a few.
Right.
Critical in all of that is going to be someone's project management skills. Talk about your project management approach and how you balance the urgent versus the important.
So the thought that comes to mind with project management, first, is relying upon the direct reports that are subject matter experts. So whatever the project relates to, so FS1 working hand in glove with the fire chief, the deputy, and anyone else that they have to understand what's going on with that. And then just making sure that I'm delegating where it's appropriate to delegate, and then those instances where it needs to be run by the administrator running that. So for my direct reports, and getting back to the earlier question, and one of the things that I did, I think, as a leadership example over my 6 years, is when I came in, there was the issue with the budget, but there was also the issue that there was no goal setting and performance evaluation. So that was something that I relied upon my background in human resources and personnel to establish. And what I always offered my direct reports was, they're the subject matter expert in whatever their program or field is, if you will, and that's always going to be the case. I'm not going to be the best DPW director, but I'm going to rely upon the best DPW director, or public safety, or human services, whatever the case may be. But for my direct reports, they understood that there were 6 criteria or areas that I would evaluate them on, and that would be personnel management, project management, procurement, of course, now I'm drawing a blank on them, communication skills, I don't know if I already said personnel, so personnel and project management, and then just overall leadership. And whatever they felt strong in, I would set goals and let them go with it. But in many instances, like with procurement or personnel, always there to follow up with them. So project management, working with the appropriate leads, so I'm the project manager, if you will, but they're the project resource or the project expert. And then just making sure that we're tying in on all the regulatory requirements, such as procurement or personnel needs, and going forward on that. And I think the second part was getting to the prioritization.
Well, using your project management experience and skills in helping prioritize your time and oversight of the urgent versus the important.
So I think it's understanding the difference between urgent, was it urgent versus important? Is that the language you used? Yeah. Because I know that for the project beneficiaries, it's going to be urgent for them. So it's really understanding and working with the board, as part of the communication of what are the urgent issues that we all agree to, and making sure those are stacked up first, making sure they're resourced properly. But that's urgent, but important still matters too. And so it's relying upon, and I apologize, my daughters tell me I use the wrong word, the apps. I'm a big fan of Microsoft Project, and relying upon those tools to track it, and working with my directs and their directs to make sure we have all the resources together. And then regular check-ins, you're going to do your project timelines and your deadlines and all of that. And, it's more to the conversations earlier of regular check-ins, whether regular is weekly or if it has to be every other day, depending upon the urgency.
And what's the type of cadence you like to have with board members when you're working with a select board?
Board members, meaning you folks.
Yes.
And I like the word cadence. I'm not used to 3 members. I'm excited about 3 members because what I did in Harwich, and to some level of success, is established one-on-ones. It was important for me to be able to have a one-on-one conversation as regularly as possible. So for me, regular was a board member a week, so that takes a month, if you will, but never hesitating to have it more frequently, one-on-ones, if it necessitated. And then using the town administrator's report to sort of bring everyone together through the meeting process itself, and relying upon blind copy emails to the rest of the board to keep them connected. So I always want to have that communication continuum going on, but not too onerous. I want to demonstrate that you can give me goals and objectives, and away I go, but I wouldn't hesitate for clarification, and I will never hesitate to keep all of you individually and collectively up to date.
Marianne.
As you know, communication and collaboration between departments as well as boards and committees is crucial in town government. How would you ensure and enhance communication, collaboration, and consensus building among team members in town, particularly on difficult issues?
So I would rely upon the regular direct report meetings, if you will, for lack of a better word, but also providing written material. I'm a big fan of having the written word, so that even though there can be misinterpretations, I think you have a better opportunity, rather than just saying it and away we go, having something tangible and tactile that we can rely upon to look at. And distributing that through the directs, having a conversation about it, working with my directs to cascade it throughout the organization if need be, and then doing periodic check-ins. You know, I think you use the concept of, you know, there can be interdepartmental, I'm going to say rivalries, or, you know, everybody wants their program or their department in a good way to be funded. So I need to be in tune with that. I need to make sure that I'm having strong conversations with each of them and together, and that we're all hearing the same message. And then, you know, the word that I like is the collaboration, because to me, inherent in that is an understanding that we are all working towards the common goals and the common benefit. And so if I can establish the standard and the process and the mechanism by which to do that, I think people will see that and emulate it and go forward.
Joe.
Thank you, Rob. Joe, when you were first appointed, let's say your position in Braintree, Wellfleet, or Harwich, did you observe any areas, concerns, or departments that caught your eye that needed to have immediate attention? And what did you do?
So I'm hung up on the word immediate. Nothing springs to mind with Braintree or Wellfleet, and of course, you know, Wellfleet is a much smaller community, and I was a one-person shop when I started out as town clerk. So I think I'm going to draw upon Harwich. You know, I think one of my earliest memories when I came in is the building commissioner was working on a fee evaluation project. And what I didn't know at the time is that he had tried unsuccessfully the year before through the board. And so when I came on, my boss had said, would you sit down with the building commissioner and just go over his fee schedule? And I thought, well, that's a piece of cake. And then what I discovered is that, you know, the fee structure was out of whack for several years. We weren't keeping up with the other communities, if you will, now that we were in competition. But that then led to let's have a more holistic, broader approach to all of our departments on their fee schedule situation. But what I'm trying to get to is, what was interesting is no one had told me about the prior year effort, and I don't think people really knew that he was trying to do it again. And so there was that disconnect of this individual department was going to do this. And so one of my first introductions to, all right, you know, the fee schedules are important. We need to update them because, as I've said with both the search committee and other groups, On the Cape for sure, there is no such thing as local aid. So that fee schedule becomes local receipts, which becomes a critical component of our finances. So that's the first thing that jumps to mind about, it wasn't anything that was ever talked about. It's a problem that came through a side conversation that then became a bigger issue. But then in the end, we were able to refine it and really get our fee schedules competitive and helping the budget because they were more accurate.
Perfect, thank you very much.
Thank you for opening the door to finance.
There we
because,
go.
Like many
Only a matter of time.
municipalities, we have tremendous budget pressures with
Yeah.
Prop 2.5,
Yeah.
and like most of the country at this point, we have a tax-exhausted tax base.
Yep.
So how would you balance our sources and uses of funds to maintain the high level of services that the residents of Westwood have come to know and expect?
Can you give me that one more time?
Sure. How would you ensure maintaining the high level of service that the taxpayers of Westwood have come to expect and do so in a fiscally responsible manner?
So I'm hesitating because when I left Harwich, as I was preparing, to leave and for them to continue on, I had told them that we were doing well we did well for 25, we were well situated for 26, and the thing that gives me nightmares is 27. And that's still the case. So what I'm hesitant on is I don't want to make a promise that that we're going to be able to sustain all programs. And I don't say that to get any gasps from any of the folks to my right, and certainly to anyone that's watching this. But as I said before, you folks are at an inflection point. And what I'm hearing to an earlier question is that fatigue. And, I know that your budget is being built. I feel very confident, as I'm sure you already do, that Stephanie and the folks that work on it have everything to a T. What my concern is overselling. Because on the Cape, as I've said, when you get over that bridge, there is no such thing as local aid. And I was shocked to learn that early on in my time in Wellfleet. Most communities on Cape Cod have high EQV, so the equalized valuation, which is the big determinant. And so most towns on the Cape pay out more to the state than they get in local aid. So we rely greatly on local receipts. We rely greatly on special revenue funds. We don't use free cash for the operating budgets, of course, that's the no-no. But we have to be very creative on Cape Cod because we can't rely upon Beacon Hill. So that is a skill and a mindset that I'll bring to Westwood, but I wouldn't want anyone to just assume that there may not be difficult decisions down the road. And those difficult decisions are ones that, if need be, I'm going to make sure you have all the information before I recommend those difficult decisions so you can make an informed decision. I don't want to overpromise until I have had an opportunity to sit down with Stephanie and the team to get a better understanding of where your finances are. But when the time comes and when town meeting comes, we will have an operating budget that reflects the priorities that we've come up with, you folks as the policy setters, and us folks as the administrators and executors of that, for lack of a better word. And that's what's going to be reflected in the operating budget and the warrant articles at town meeting.
Thank you.
But I can't say tonight that it's going to be a happy occasion. I think we have to prepare ourselves for we don't know what's going to come out of the government that's reopening. We don't know what's going to happen with the markets, both globally and statewide. So there are a lot of unknowns right now. But by the time we get to town meeting, we will know what's what, and we will have a balanced budget that supports the priorities that we can fund.
Thank you very much. Mary Ann?
If I could piggyback on that answer, clearly the tax base is one pie
Sure.
that needs to accommodate all of the municipal services and the school services. So could you speak a little more specifically, understanding there are many unknowns,
Sure.
as to what your approach would be to budget building, and specifically with respect to working with the schools to make sure that all of our services are maintained in a sustainable manner.
So as you said at the beginning, I'm not used to being in the middle of November and not knowing exactly where my budget's at that point in time. For me, at this point in time, I would have already done my preliminary meeting with the direct reports for them to start building their budgets, to start doing their analysis. I would typically do take your budget from the last year, understand your fixed costs that you have to, carry over anyway, whether it's personnel related or contractual obligations, meaning the procurement side, if you will. And then let's get a sense of, okay, where are we with the growth, the new growth, the levy limit, what are our assumptions and all that stuff. Start building that. And then, full disclosure, inherited it from my predecessor. Then we did a separate thing called enhancement of services. And what I like about that is you have your existing program, so we can build on that and we can continue that. But we're not going to stop having the conversation on what does your program need to get to the next level? Not just tread water, if you will, but how do we want to expand on these critical programs and services that your department offers? And so that's a great exercise, because what it does is it doesn't impact your bottom line in the short term. You have it accounted for, and in some instances you can plug and play. And so I want my team to do that, and starting in August and September. I would have already sat down with you folks, in this instance here in Westwood, working with Stephanie and her team, to give you, and by extension the community, where the town looks in October, if you will. And then certainly through it all, we would have been doing our capital plans. So for me, it would be to remind each of the department heads, each of the budget owners, that subject matter expert, you have a program, or you have a service, or you have a benefit to the community, and that's supported by your budget. Where are you, not level fund, but say stasis? And then where do you think we need to expand to continue to add value to the community? It's not a guarantee, but we can start having those conversations, and we're quantifying the dollar amounts as we go.
Just a follow-up to that before I give it over to Joe. So much of the operating budget, as you know, is people. And so many of those people are represented in collective bargaining agreements. How do you approach those agreements when it's time for renewal to ensure that you get as much of the buy-in from the union as you can, but also do so in a way that is sustainable on an ongoing basis?
Sure.
I imagine that's part of why you don't like thinking about 27.
Absolutely. I get a little jumpy. Well, first I will say that, doing my due diligence and looking at Westwood, we're comparable. You have similar groups that we had. So we Harwich, were 8 collective bargaining groups. I think your general government, I always get it wrong, is 5 or 6 groups, and then the remainder are the schools. And so we didn't have that in Harwich because the schools were regional, and that was sort of a different thing. But the 8 were on the same cycle. And that was something that the board and I worked at early on in my tenure. There's a value there. There's also a little bit of pain that goes with it, but at least you can, forecast better, in my opinion. And so, had I been here, what I would have been doing is going through the agreements, understanding where we are at and seeing if there are inflection points. Are there language changes that will manifest itself in dollars that we want to offer them, we know they're going to offer on their side, and a recognition that truly everything's negotiable within those documents. Having said that, they want to know about the COLAs. What is it for each year? Is it going to be a 3-year? What is the percentage? What I want to know on our end, working with the finance team, is, okay, it's not, it's not necessarily going to be 333, if you will. If the number's 9, how do we want to split it up over the 3? And then negotiating that. But then it gets to a topic that I'm a little bit disappointed in myself it took me this long to say. But those collective bargaining agreements are then going to show why Westwood, as I wanted Harwich to be, as an employer of choice. Because we take those personnel matters seriously. We honor the process of bargaining collectively. We take our role as management as seriously as they do, as the collective groups. and it manifests itself in strong language that benefits both the town and the employee, and numbers that the town can support that show the value statement for the employees.
Thank you. Joe?
Joe, assets and policies are similar. They have to be reviewed periodically. When was the last time that you looked at the number of town-owned vehicles that Harwich had? And when was the last time you looked at the number of cell phones that the town was issuing to employees? And how often did you review that to see if there could be enhancements?
Would you believe me if I told you constantly, for the vehicles especially? When I inherited the capital program in 2019, and that was, late in the year, it was about this time 6 years ago, you couldn't find that information, and I didn't like that, because you can find the vehicles. They're easy to identify out there in the real world. And so as time went by, you'll see if you look at the capital plan now, it very clearly articulates the vehicles that we have. Now, we're also able to match that with the Maya schedule, so we have all of that data up front. But I was stunned at how many vehicles we had, and it was one of the efforts that I tried unsuccessfully to get the board, because the way I would have said it as a resident is we had one vehicle for every 2 employees. Which just is not sustainable in the long term. So I'm constantly aware of that from both the capital investment side of it, but also the insurance side of it. And for the cell phones, mercifully, it wasn't as drastic, and that was something we did quite simply through treasury collection. But those are the devils in the details. That where you can make a difference if you can reduce your fleet or have your fleet be far more expedient than, one vehicle for every 2 employees on average. So vehicles for sure were a big part of the capital plan, and they were drawn out in the capital plan, and then cellular service through Treasury collector's budget.
Thank you.
Earlier, you mentioned the wastewater management project and the 3 phases. I'm sure you're aware of our dual facility studies and, the approach that we want to take in terms of planning the effective addressing of the various needs, those things identified. Can you talk about your experience in managing a capital plan as well as implementing major capital improvement projects?
I think I can. So like I said, with Harwich, the charter was very clear that the administrator is responsible for building, quote, the comprehensive budget. So that was everything. That was the commitment to the schools. That was the operating budgets and any other budgets, including the water department, which was enterprise, and golf, which was fee-based. And then part and parcel with that, the administrator was responsible for building the capital plan. And so, that's something that I have intimate understanding and facility with. And with regard to the projects, obviously wastewater is an easy thing to talk about because it's the big thing we're doing on the Cape. But other capital projects that we were successful in is bringing back online a middle school. That helps us with our economic development because, as I was telling the group yesterday, economic development on Cape Cod can look a little bit differently than economic development here over the bridge, as we say. But for us getting that middle school back online as a municipal building, it is the hub of our cultural center. And that cultural center hosts artists, and those artists bring tourists, and those tourists bring money. And so that was a project where the middle school was really just was quite literally abandoned for a few years, and I was able to bring that back online. The other part of the capital is the investment in the vehicles and also the equipment. We were able to do an investment in the fire department. If I say the word quint, is that universal for? Yeah, so we were able to bring a quint into the town, which is that Swiss Army knife, sorry, Chief, for lack of a better phrase. So we were able to really make strong investments in infrastructure like those, vehicles and what have you. And then for me, it gets back to project management. The capital budget isn't all funded through the levy. Parts of that are funded through either special funds that are available in other departments. Certainly, we use an element of free cash, and if necessary, we do borrowing. So I hope I'm getting to the essence of that, but that, there's a number of examples I could go through, but those are the ones that jump to mind readily.
Thank you. Mary Ann?
An important part of the portfolio of services that the town provides is human services. Our prior town administrator formed a human rights task force. Can you talk about what experience you have in that regard and how you would prioritize that work?
Certainly. So, and you said human rights, correct?
Yes.
Thank you. So human rights is not something that we delved into in Harwich or, the surrounding communities, but human services certainly is. I inherited a program of human services grants. So I would say the good news is we had a grant program. The bad news is we had a grant program because there's critical need for human services, beyond what the operating budget does. So I was able to sort of overhaul that process, working with the human services providers, the Council on Aging, folks that tie into visiting nurses and things of that nature. So we overhauled the grant program to make it easier to apply, and we expanded the financing. Now, having said that, it's still not enough. It's a drop in the bucket. I was speaking to the group yesterday. One of the things I did as a resident when I moved there is I joined the family pantry in Harwich because, the old adage of those to whom much is given, much is required. And it was cathartic. It was great to get back in that regard. But pre-COVID, I was shocked at how food insecurity was a real thing, and it's far worse now than it was then. So for me, the human services was making sure we were reaching out to at-risk children through the Harwich Fund, which is a recipient of the grant program. I and other healthcare issues, and also programs that supported those folks confidentially that, utility bills and things of that nature. So I'm proud of that work, but also still dismayed because the needs are still there, and you can never do too much, and there's always a great need. But that's my experience with it, I look forward to understanding what the needs are here in this community in that regard, and certainly for the concept of human rights. That's something that personally appeals to me in continuing that work.
Joe?
Thank you, Rob. You alluded to it in the beginning. This is more for my own edification, but
Sure.
in regards to human resources, it sounds like you've got a bifurcated system. Do you have a separate human resources director, or is that a shared position?
So we now have, I was able to establish a role of a human resources director. It started out simply as a human resources coordinator. That was the compromise. But prior to that, the town administrator, and prior to me, the assistant town administrator was the primary point of contact for human resources. And we evolved that and grew that to now have a human resources director. An appointment by the administrator, but really meant to be sort of standalone, if you will. So there's that separation because they want to give comfort to the employees that Big Brother's not watching over them. So again, it started out simply as a human resources coordinator. You make the case for the director. I made it for years, but we got the coordinator in, and then we were able to enhance it to a director.
Nice work. Thank you.
By the way, you're doing an outstanding job on your timeliness. It allows us to
And the
broaden it.
succinctness?
I've made a note of that for you.
Yes. And so, in keeping with that theme of communication,
Absolutely.
Trust in government. It seems to be a challenge at all levels. We're committed here in Westwood to enhancing that trust in government through transparency and customer service. So provide some examples of what you would bring to enhance this commitment.
Well, the first thing I think of when I think of transparency is making sure that we're using language and words that everybody can understand. For a time I worked in the federal government a long time ago, and then in the corporate sector, and man, do they love their acronyms. And so it was actually in Wellfleet when I first started it, making sure that if we were doing acronyms, we made sure that we first said what the acronym stood for. And little things like that. So then if we start using the jargon or the lingo, people have a greater understanding. So little things like that, I think, go a long way. And that sort of supports my lifelong mantra of words matter. And then with words matter, I would go with actions matter. I pride myself on being a leader that can first do and demonstrate so that I can be a role model, if you will, and others can emulate that. And that's the good side. The downside is I'm not perfect. There are examples of where I have, in my own words, failed miserably or colossally at certain communication efforts. And I can delve into that more if you need me to, but not a point of pride, but a point of ownership. To develop trust, you have to act. And you have to act in a manner that people are going to see as consistent, and they're going to realize that a consistency leads to results. You want to be somebody that is solid, for lack of a better word. And so for me, I'm hedging a little bit because a few years back I was at a place where I said, before I was interviewing, I was reading about somebody who was going to bring a workshop on the golden rule is outdated, it's the platinum rule. And I said I disagreed with that. Well, I come to find out the audience laughed because the gentleman that was doing it was right behind me. So I don't want to make that mistake again. But it is the golden rule insofar as I want to act in a manner that I would hope that people would treat me in. And so transparency is making sure we're using language that everybody can understand, that we're open and honest about the options and the decisions and the effects, and then leading by example.
Okay. Do either of my colleagues have any further questions? If not, we can move to a closing statement, but I will ask you.
I'm
both.
good, thank you, Rob.
All set?
Sum it all up for us, Joe. What would you like to leave us with?
Well, I'm going to start where I'm going to end my statement where I started by saying thank you. I've told your teams, the different groups that I met with, that when I made the conscious decision to move on from Harwich, mutual, but certainly something that I was looking to do, Bernie and all the consultants said that there were going to be opportunities out there, and it's time for me to look beyond the Cape. Westwood was not on my bingo card. So I was pleasantly surprised to see that the community had an opening. Curious as to why it happened. I had an opportunity to talk to Chris. And ironically, the reason I'm here is because it's a great opportunity in a great town. There are similarities that we have, AAA bond rating, and smart strategies and goals, I think. But it's also an opportunity for me to help my family, to be closer to family. So thank you for giving me the opportunity. I've said before, I don't know that you're going to find an administrator that was a school committee member, a select board member, a moderator, a town clerk, but here I am. And what I say by that is I love local government. I love the purpose of local government. I'm a sap that loves town meeting. You already heard me say I love Robert's Rules of Order and town meeting time. So I would love the opportunity to be your next town administrator. I hope I've either made your decision very easy by my answers tonight, or very difficult because you have a difficult choice to make. But I know that I can make an immediate impact. I know you have a solid group of employees. You have a dedicated community that's vocal. That's good. I want to be a part of that. So thank you for giving me the chance to present myself this evening, and I would love to be the next town administrator here in the town of Westwood.
Thank you very much for being here and sharing your story.
All right. Good luck in your process.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. We'll take a quick five, and then we'll bring in the last candidate. All right, Bernie, take it away for our introduction to our final candidate.
Well, you took the words right out of my mouth. We now have your third candidate that you'll be interviewing tonight, Connor Reed. Connor's currently the town administrator in the town of Easton. He's been there. Well, I'll let him tell his story. He's been there a number of years. He's your third candidate, and I will turn it back over to you.
Why, thank you very much. Welcome, Connor.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Sure thing. On behalf of my colleagues and the broader community, we want to welcome you and thank you for your interest in serving as our next town administrator. This next 75 minutes, I've been keeping everybody to an hour, but I am told that we had a little bit of buffer in there. So this next hour or so is for you to help share your story, what your interest is in our community, and what your qualifications are, most importantly, to serve as our next town administrator and help us navigate the many challenges we face as a community. So with that, I'd like you to invite you to make some opening remarks about yourself and why Westwood, and then we'll follow up with a round-robin set of questions on a whole number of areas of interest.
Great. Thank you so much. So good evening to Chair Gotti, Vice Chair Prutatera, and third member LeBlanc Cummings. I'm very happy to be here tonight for what I hope is the first of many, many meetings that we share together, hopefully not this late. My name is Connor Reed. I'm going to take a few minutes just to introduce myself to the board and the Westwood community who may be watching at home, both professionally and personally. A little bit about my professional background. I come to you tonight with 14 years of municipal experience, a decade of that at the leadership level, having served as the assistant town administrator and the acting town clerk early in my career, and the past 9 years being the town administrator in Easton. Easton is a growing community of 25,000 residents with an operating budget of about $110 million, with about 160 municipal employees. During my tenure as town administrator, I've had the great privilege to build and lead a team of excellent department heads, a mirror image I see here in this community. Working with the select board and the community to deliver more than $300 million worth of infrastructure and facilities enhancements, including replacing all of Easton's elementary schools and replacing every single police, fire, and public works property. We have built and expanded sewer systems. We have tackled PFAS contamination and built PFAS treatment plants, expanded multimodal roadway networks, without losing who we are by continuing to prioritize open space preservation. Just as Westwood has wisely completed a comprehensive facilities needs assessment plan, Easton did so too in 2014. And I'm very proud to say that during my tenure, we have replaced a third of the square footage of the entire school campus, and we will have replaced or substantially repaired 95% of all municipal buildings in a 10-year window, and have done so at a lower cumulative tax impact than many communities now face to build a single school building. We did so with careful long-term capital planning and by overperforming on grants, bringing more than $65 million from the state and federal government to Easton. To combat a decades-long structural revenue gap, my team implemented Easton's first financial management policies to build our reserves and curb their use in the operating budget. We've doubled our cash reserves and we've quadrupled our stabilization fund balance. Doing so has required Easton to run extraordinarily lean, with an efficient operation that leverages interdepartmental collaboration and regional cooperation to stretch every single tax dollar as far as we possibly can to do the most good for the most people we can. This includes the creation of a Health and Community Services Division, whose job it is to break down red tape and barriers for our seniors, our veterans, and our residents living with disabilities. And it also includes working with our municipal neighbors to partner for regional infrastructure to boost our economic development potential. By pairing housing, economic development, and infrastructure, we've increased opportunities for our residents, new and old, by diversifying our housing inventory and achieving the best years ever for new growth in Easton, both in nominal dollars, topping 1.5 million last year and 1.1 million this year, but also from a percentage of that new growth that's being generated by commercial, industrial, and personal property. All of this has led to a 10-year average single-family tax bill increase in Easton that's below the Massachusetts state average, despite Easton's residential properties appreciating faster than all surrounding communities. My public service extends beyond Easton. I am also the chairman of a 90,000-person 911 district, lovingly known as SEMREC, which is what happens, no offense, chief, when you let chiefs make acronyms for emergency ops centers. It has improved emergency response capabilities while cutting our operating costs locally in half, saving Easton millions of dollars and winning international award in the process. I serve on the Massachusetts Municipal Association's Fiscal Policy Committee and have contributed to the recently released landmark report by the Municipal Association on the significant financial headwinds facing all communities in Massachusetts, surely including Westwood. And finally, I was the sole municipal appointee to the Commonwealth's PFAS Interagency Task Force, whose work has served as the foundation of ongoing lawmaking for combating these forever chemicals in our community. My calling to public service is not just professional, it's deeply personal. And the road that led me here tonight started more than 20 years ago when I was in middle school. My father, who was the guiding light in my life and the glue that held my family together, fell ill with cancer and died unexpectedly. And some families persevere through grief like that and come out of it stronger, and unfortunately mine didn't. It fell to pieces. I had been a straight A student. I think I had a Bill Clinton Award for my art class. I thought I had a plan and a sense of purpose and guidance, and that I was gonna grow up and get straight A's, go to college, and change the world. And that's not what happened. My grades slipped. I became a despondent teenager, struggling to get through the day. I stopped caring about myself, and for my future. And were it not for the intervention of public servants, high school teachers, guidance counselors, school resource officers, or the availability of public institutions like UMass, where I met my wife and discovered my love of public service and government, I would have fallen through the cracks. I would not have a beautiful family I have today. I have two beautiful daughters who I love very much and are probably going to watch this. And I would not have had the privilege to lead a career of service like I've had in Easton. And most of all, I most certainly would not be invited for a seat at this table in front of this board. I share that with you to make real that I have very firsthand experience of a profound impact of public service, and that I carry that with me every day. It's what drives me to lead with compassion and with empathy, and to always check myself that no matter how nice your title is or how high you are on the org chart, that we're all here to help people, to serve people, to bring people together, to solve today's problems, and maybe be the difference maker for a teenager who's fallen behind in life. I believe that that professional and lived experience fits hand in glove with Westwood's priorities, your opportunities, your challenges, your focus on community engagement, facilities, and financial planning, leading a team of excellent first-class department heads, and maintaining the amazing sense of community that I trust the three of you take well-earned pride in this community. The road that's in front of you is full of opportunity. There are also challenges for all of us. But I'll close by saying that I've been so impressed and excited at every step of this process, whether that's seeing the clear cross-team collaboration of the representation you had on your town administrator screening committee, of folks wanting to work together for the right reasons, whether that's your staff and your department heads, who you will be happy to know grilled me very sternly in this seat yesterday, or just the kind of communal vibe of coming up and getting muffins in Islington on a Sunday, or watching the three of you at your Veterans Day ceremony on Tuesday, where you did a very nice job and represented the community and those who serve very well. I have spent an enormous amount of time reading your reports, budgets, comprehensive annual financial plans, and been listening to Westwood Media on 2x speed after tuck-in time for a few months now. I really admire how much you live your values and invest in education and youth and family services and mental health. And I just think that this is an incredible place, and it'd be an honor to be a part of it. So again, thank you. Thank you so much for having me here, and I'm really excited to get to know each other tonight.
Thank you for sharing the beginnings of your story, and I want to then dovetail into, so how has that shaped your leadership style? And can you give us some examples of leading your team through change in a community or within an organization that has been, turbulent?
Sure, thank you. That's a great question. I think, as you know, surely, there's entire graduate degrees devoted to this question, so thank you for starting me with a softball. When I think of leadership, I think of integrity and inspiration. And integrity is that you do the right thing for the right reason, even when no one's watching. Integrity as a leader means that your team, internal, and the citizens that you are expected to serve and lead know that when you say you're going to do something, you will. That the reasons you say for doing them are genuine and sincere, and importantly, in a role like this, backed by good data and community-driven plans. And that if things go awry, which they sometimes do, that you'll hold yourself responsible for that and figure out a way to do better the next time. When I think about inspiration, I think a really important role for a town administrator. I often will say, when I think I did yesterday when I met with department heads, I should not know more about running a fire department than your fire chief. I should not know more about the proper slope for a storm drain going to a catch basin. I need to know enough to know the right questions. I need to know enough to appreciate the work so that I can motivate and inspire and support those folks in doing their best work. Inspiring your team, building them up, knowing when to step out in front and lead from the front, especially when times are hard. I take a great amount of pride, and I know folks have been doing a lot of research, and I'm sure you all have too. You've watched my town meetings. If you speak to any department head, they will testify that I would not ever ask them to do something that I wouldn't do myself. I would not send them to go do a difficult project and not be the first one in front taking hits. It's easy to be the town administrator when you're cutting the ribbon for a new building. It's hard when you're asking people to raise taxes. And you need to do both. You also need to know when to recede to the background. I am not the mayor. I do not want to be the mayor. That's not the town administrator's role. It's a balance of being present in the community, being available to your team, to your citizens, without making everything about you. And so there are times when something goes really well, but it's the right thing to do to step back and let that department shine. Let that person feel the excitement and the pride of the work that they've done, which is not just good for them and motivating them and showing them that you're in this for them, not for yourself. It gives them an opportunity to have their value reaffirmed publicly and in the community. And when you do that over time, as I've had the pleasure of doing in Easton, you nurture a culture of excellence that people respect and value. So,
Can I ask you
Yes.
to give an example of each, where you stepped out and took the slings and arrows, and where you took most pride in being able to step back?
there's been a whole lot of slings and arrows. Having managed through two failed overrides and a global pandemic and the worst inflation in 40 years. But I suppose one that sticks out to me is, and I hope we get to talk about this later tonight, we have built 3 sewer districts in Easton in my tenure. There actually used to be none. If you could imagine a community with more residents than Dedham with 0 sewer, that's what we were working with. So it wasn't the best for economic development. So we built numerous sewer districts in Easton, and we actually just got approved at our town meeting Monday night to get to work on the 4th. And I'm sure it works the same way because you folks have access to, I believe, MWRA treatment. Primarily, a lot of these projects are funded through the assessment of betterments. And that's functionally an improvement lien on the property, right? And we can kind of intellectualize and from a legal perspective, rationalize why you don't use general capital for an infrastructure enhancement that's going to very specifically improve the value of a discrete property, and that it is fair and equitable to portion out those costs to those owners. That all makes sense. It doesn't change that when you're trying to build the largest sewer infrastructure project in your community's history, at that time we were price tag well north of 20 million, and because of the complexity of that infrastructure, with some pieces of it having to be more than 30 feet down, having to run all the way from the Mansfield regional connection to Easton, that single-family homes might pay up to $32,000 for betterment, or that a condo that's not even 1,500 square feet may have to do the same. That is not the easiest sales pitch to make, right? But that's the sales pitch we had to make. And I was not going to step behind the director of public works and say, good luck, Dave. Maybe I'll see you tomorrow, right? So I believe in, when you're doing big projects like this, which I hope doesn't sound arrogant to say is kind of my thing, you have to be really upfront with the ugly part. You can't just tell people about the cool stuff that happens after it's all built. New restaurants, mixed-use development, new housing opportunities. You have to lead with the hard part, which is this will be monstrously expensive. Traffic is going to be a complete nightmare. So this is a state highway or state-numbered road that's only 2 lanes, and we had to close it for multiple years. Voicemails of just yelling, just primal rage to our office were commonplace. So you do that because I'm a big believer that it's a whole lot better to underpromise and overdeliver than the inverse. It's really hard to go to town meeting and ask for $20 million to build a sewer that's going to have $32,000 betterments. It would be much, much harder than assuming that the actual results we achieved, which was bringing it in dramatically under budget and cutting those betterments in half to a third to maybe $9,000, being wrong and having to come back and ask for more. So it's not just about laying that out there, it's about going to where people are, right? You all know as elected officials that it can sometimes be frustrating or disheartening that a lot of the most important parts about our daily lives are decided here on this level in rooms like this, and not a lot of folks engage, usually until something's going wrong. So it's not good enough to just do a presentation at town hall when maybe 5 people will go. So we mailed to every single property in the district. We did door knockers to every single property in the district with a dedicated website, a dedicated phone number that people could call 24/7 to get basic information about the project, what it looks like, why we're doing it, how we're going to do it, what it's going to cost them. And we invited all of them to a community forum at a VFW that I thought that the paint was going to melt off the wall from the heat in that room. It was standing room only. It was early in my tenure as town administrator, I think perhaps 2017 or 18. And I remember one of my select board members, who I care for very dearly, looked at me and goes, "Good luck." And so we went in, we had open mic night, and we explained to more than 100 people, this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing, this is how it ties back to the comprehensive waste management plan, wastewater management plan. It ties back to the sewer districts that town meeting itself adopted. And there were people who were apoplectic, for whom if these betterments came out at that price tag, could mean pushing them out of their home. And so, I know this is long-winded, I do suffer from that affliction, but Rob, back to your question. I kind of constitutionally as a person would never even think to put my public works director as the front line of that. He was there with me, don't get me wrong, but I was the one walking up and down the aisles with folks getting very emotional and very upset and taking their questions head on. And I'm really proud to say that where we went from there is that that group of neighbors organized. They named themselves the Furnace Village Neighborhood Collaborative. There's a decent amount of attorneys living in that area, and so they said, listen, betterments are the law, like this is, we can't kind of sue our way out of this, let's work together. And so we did the rather unusual thing, although you probably don't think it is now, seeing what I brought you as my printed materials, of having hundreds of citizens and business owners sign letters of support for our MassWorks applications, for getting MassWorks funds for those sewers, by organizing those folks to adopt a 40Q district improvement financing district in that area so that we could use bond increment financing to reduce the betterment costs, by working with 40B, friendly 40B developments, to bring 300 units of apartments to that corridor with great access to 495, and rather than them building a treatment plant for themselves, having them contribute multiple million in cash mitigation to the town to advance the infrastructure project ahead of schedule, so that at the end of the day, those folks had their betterments cut in half or to a third. And something I'm very proud of, and it's tucked away somewhere in there, it's not the most glamorous, it's a set of minutes, but a resident of that collaborative, years after this concluded and the select board voted the final order of assessments, which is not a very glamorous thing to do, came to the meeting and read a letter on behalf of 175 citizens in that neighborhood thanking the town, myself, the assistant town administrator, planning director, DPW director, and the select board for working collaboratively with them the entire time, hearing their concerns, and finding a way to truly drive the cost of that project down, improve the infrastructure, and really take the lid off on development in that wonderful neighborhood, and to care about them. So, super long answer, I apologize, but very proud of it. I think it's a good one. What was the last part?
Don't worry about it. We will.
Fair enough.
We'll move on, and I'm sure that it will come out somewhere else in the rest of all of this. Mary Ann, let's take a question from you.
Sure.
Oh, sorry.
So how would you go about assessing the organizational structures, the systems, resident satisfaction levels in Westwood? And let me piggyback that with, what would the first 100 days look like for you?
That is a good question. So, the first 100 days, assuming perhaps I started late January, would have 4 big picture focuses for me. One would be getting my arms around your budget and prep for town meeting, because that's one of the most important things the town administrator does in service of the select board and the community. Second would be FS1 and your building needs, where you are with the interim needs of that fire station and how that's informing the school committee and superintendent's work towards the statement of interest to the MSBA and the other significant needs that you have as a community. The third, which would be getting on top of collective bargaining. I know that you have numerous agreements expiring at the end of next fiscal year, but I believe you've all made some really good progress on that, so maybe that would be great, and it's all handled. And then fourth would be building relationships inside and outside of town hall. So those would be kind of a big picture priorities I would have in my first 100 days. But I think importantly would be, what would I do before the first day? And if I'm so fortunate to get a call from you folks on Sunday night, Chief can count that I'm going to be calling him Monday morning to get my arms around FS1, call the chair to understand where the reconstituted, which I think was a good move, committee of citizens for the building oversight, where does that stand? I would be asking your very capable finance director for the most current actuals to adopted budget for collections and spend, to see where the development of the budget for fiscal 27 is, both for operating and capital. I would hopefully be spending a good amount of time with the three of you folks, getting to know you more, understanding how do you communicate, how do you prefer to communicate, how do you not prefer to communicate. And if time allows, also maybe start the process of something I think would be really important, of getting to know the chairs and vice chairs of all of your boards. So to do that, also, not a fun topic, but it's real, it's the job. I would want to connect with your counsel and get briefed on any litigation or threats or risks from a risk management perspective, to ensure that when I am here, I know what's going on and what needs to be done to protect the town. So I don't have a plan for every single one of the 100 days, but I do, I think for the first 3 weeks, the first week I would want to be meeting with the executive function group and get detailed briefs from each of them, get to know the staff in all of our buildings, and again, continue meetings with the select board members. In the second week, I'd like to start, if I haven't yet, one-on-one meetings with the chairs and vice chairs of your many committees. You have an enormous amount of citizen participation in Easton. Your charter is very similar to Easton in some ways and different in others. And there's clearly a culture here and an expectation of a lot of engagement with your boards, and I want to be ready to do that and do it right. Continue figuring out where light switches are in the lay of the land. Third week, again, make sure that we have those meetings with the chairs going on. I'd like to start hosting citizen meet and greets, whether that's a kind of communal event where perhaps you folks are with me, or if it's just one-on-1, one-on-10 office hours. So it's something that I've done throughout my career in Easton, especially if there's something new or exciting or very hard happening. I will make sure that I have weekly office hours at different times and days and in different places, so that if folks are curious and want to drop in and talk directly to me, that they could do so. We just had a town meeting where a feasibility study for establishing a stormwater utility was on the warrant, and so we did an offer of office hours at the library, myself and the director of public works. Right, so I would want to, by that third week, be intentionally making sure to be getting out of town hall, meeting your residents, and getting to know those folks. And then by the fourth week, I would take some time to probably breathe, take stock of where things stand, and prepare for the remainder of the fiscal year. Thank you.
Joe?
Before I ask my question, Veterans Day,
Yes,
pea coat?
yes,
Thought so.
turtleneck. Love turtlenecks. I made fun of it, made fun of for it
Not a-
ruthlessly.
None of us will pass judgment on the turtleneck on that day.
Yes, yes.
Con, I'm going to drill down a little bit just to learn more about you.
Sure.
How many direct reports do you have? I won't answer that till the mic comes. Thanks, Charlotte.
That's a good question. Too many,
Okay.
clearly. We have an extraordinarily lean and too flat organizational structure. So as I mentioned before, Easton is a community of 25,000, so actually more residents than Dedham. Our budget is less than Westwood. And so the executive staff, the select board staff, is 3 people counting me. We do not have a procurement department. We only, in the past 2 years or 3 years, have professionalized HR and have 1.5 FTE there. So we don't have kind of a deputy lieutenant structure in the administration and finance in particular. So I have an assistant town administrator and an executive assistant. And so every department head, police chief, fire chief, public works director, assistant town administrator, town clerk, inspector of buildings, director of health and community services, finance director, report to me.
Good. And how often do you meet with them?
It varies by department, it varies by season of what's pertinent in town. I think, kind of meeting with police, fire, public works, and finance is kind of constant, less formal pick up the phone, call, talk. I have a weekly meeting with my staff, the assistant town administrator and executive assistant, every Monday, and a weekly meeting with HR every Monday. Take stock, where are we at, what are the priorities for the week, is there any kind of burning topic. We do bi-monthly or quarterly all hands on deck meetings with all of the leadership team. And the other departments, again, it depends on the nature of what's going on. Again, I'm certainly not here to mislead you folks. There may be weeks where myself and the building commissioner don't connect. That's not because I don't value him, not because I don't respect him, but he is similarly lean, he's really busy. And I know that he's doing his job. However, if there's a contentious lawsuit relating to a zoning complaint, we might be talking every single day. So I think certain really large departments, police, fire, public works, finance, you need to be making sure that you're connecting routinely. And
Let
there
me
needs
stop you
to,
there. That's the word I was looking for. So you routinely meet with them? Those.
of course.
Okay. And
Yes.
did you say you have a separate HR department?
Yes, it's a director and a part-time employee.
Thank you.
Yep.
That's good, Connor. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, you know that, depending, I think you said something about late January, you would be arriving late in the game in a very important part of the process, right? Planning fiscal year '27, we're talking about FS1 and the committee that's going to continue to push that forward. We have the multiple municipal collective bargaining agreements that are in process. Yes, hopefully those would be settled, or at least largely settled by the time this person starts, but you never know. And then, the longer term facility studies on both the school and the municipal side that we need to be able to properly plan for, because we have far more need than we have resource to address.
Correct.
So, describe your approach to project management and juggling the many balls that you have to juggle in Easton, and how you would balance your time and oversight of the important versus the urgent.
It's a good question. I think the key to successful project management is being realistic, being pragmatic, and appreciating that if we are sincerely going to be prioritizing, we can't do everything at full speed all at once. Because if every single thing is a priority, then nothing is. So what's helped significantly for me in Easton when it comes to project management and kind of oversight of the organization is there are times when you should pause and take stock and say, why am I doing the thing I'm doing right now? Does this tie back to the community's comprehensive plan? Does this advance the objectives or the policies of the select board? Does this operationalize the capital or the operating budget, or is this noise? And so what we've done in Easton is that we've kind of made a vertical silo where we do goal setting. And I think that's super important, right? Because the best way to know what the priorities are is to actually articulate, rank, and specify them. And so in Easton, the way that we do that is that I put together a set of priorities, strategic priorities, with the select board that they adopt every year. That is reflected in the operating budget requests within revenue constraints that we have. And it is also then reflected downward through the departments. Each department does internal goal setting so that they and I know exactly what is expected over the next 12 months, and that they and I know exactly what we're going to talk about when we do an annual performance review. We make sure that we're focusing our energy on the right things by synthesizing those annual goals with our operating plan and tying that back to our community level vision plans, the comprehensive plan, the newly adopted climate plan, your open space and rec plans, your housing production plans.
Can I stop you just to double click on that a little bit? When you say you set the strategic priorities
Yes.
each year with the select board that they adopt, given what is likely the multi-year nature of many of those strategic objectives, how much do they change year to year?
It's a good question. So I have included in the portfolio, I provide you a copy of my most recent year's goals and objectives along with a performance review that came with it. As is shocking to the three of you by now, I'm sure, tend to go long on things. And so I think earlier in my career, perhaps overcompensating, my goals and objectives had like spreadsheets and it went on forever. It was exhausting just to read it, let alone do it. And so as time has gone on, I've tried to shrink that down to, 6 pages or so. And the opening preamble acknowledges there's a whole bunch of stuff we have to do every year, forever. Here's the charter, here's the master plan. I'm not going to repeat it here. So it depends. In my case in Easton, there are certain ones that do. They take years, right? So the Blanche James Elementary School. The process for that really started, I believe, in the mid-2010s. Feasibility was funded in 2017. Ribbon cutting was in 2023. I'm very familiar with those kind of long duration projects. So there are some where the goal for the year may be improvement of public assets and facilities in Easton or in Westwood. And the objective will be advance from schematic to design development, advance from design development to bid, advance from bid to construct. So I might, to the extent it's helpful for my board, and I would of course look to this board for direction on what works for you and works for me, highlight.
So the objective stays, but the milestone advances.
Yes, I think that's fair. So I think I'm splitting hairs here, but like the goal areas are usually the same, right? Finance, personnel, land use and economic development, and the objectives change over time as some more are accomplished. And so what I like to do in that annual goal setting is I also include a reference that says Envision Easton. That's our community master plan. Envision Easton reference, and it gives an acronym reference back to the community plan on what our master plan as a community is, to show how this work will be implementing and operationalizing that goal that this community has articulated matters to them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, as you know, collaboration and communication between departments, along with boards and committees, in town government is crucial. What would you do to ensure and enhance communication, collaboration, consensus building among team members, particularly on difficult issues?
Sure. So I think the best way to successfully navigate difficult issues is to make friends before the issues get difficult. We're all people. Sometimes we wear fancy Constitution ties, but we're all people. We're doing our best. Usually without all the resources we need, almost never with the amount of time we want. And so I think that it's critical, whether that's with boards and committees, with the select board, with your department heads, with the staff, that you just be friendly and get to know them and build a rapport, understand each other's communication style, while still maintaining boundaries, right? It's incredibly important. It's something that I've had to work very hard on my career with functionally no middle management, that if you need to find a balance between if something comes up, call me, and please use judgment before jumping to call me, right? Because if your organization's functioning properly, if the police or fire chief's calling me, it's probably really bad and needs my attention immediately. And you learn that about each other. They're not going to call you to say, oh, there's a flat on the fire truck. Like, okay, clearly I don't know what to do about that, right? So you build those relationships kind of forever, right? It's not, we had a good conversation about fire department, fire bargaining, ambulance. And the way I look at it is that if the only time the town administrator is sitting with union leadership is in a grievance hearing, a termination hearing, or at the bargaining table, you're set up to fail. We can't all be best friends, and you need to maintain professional boundaries, but it goes an awful long way to just be a human being. Get lunch once in a while, get coffee, ask people how their kids are doing, and form those relationships so they know who you are as a person and that they can count on you to be forthright. When we're navigating difficult problems, one of the hardest parts is, do we all agree on what the problem is? Right? We can't fix problems. We have fundamentally mutually exclusive views of the world. I find a lot more success in being able to convey what a problem is, what the urgency is, or to receive that information with somebody that I've made the investment on the front end to try to know a little.
Connor,
So-
I'm going to ask you just to go a little bit deeper on what you alluded to with the chief in the conversation yesterday with respect to the collective bargaining.
Yes.
You guys recently moved to an outsourced ambulance service.
That's correct.
and that was a very, very difficult decision. But I would like you to sort of elaborate for my colleagues in the community as to how you got to that decision and what type of consensus there was in reaching that decision.
Sure, thank you. I appreciate you also acknowledging that it was difficult, because I'm assuming you watched some of our public presentations and discussions on the subject.
I did that, but I also had a very good conversation with the EFG group before coming in here this evening, and I would like you to tell that story in your own words.
Great, thank you. So, moving to a private ambulance model was not my or the fire chief's first, second, or third choice. In Easton, we have combated a very, very difficult structural revenue gap, functionally forever, and have had to try to navigate the fact that our call volume has doubled in 10 years, from 2,000 to 4,000 a year, which is very comparable to Westwood, while being a minimum aid community, so getting $30 per kid, new education funding, while having, up until 2014, very little commercial tax base, not having that growth to meet the needs of the fire department. And so with safer grants and kind of year-over-year planning, reallocating overtime into staff rather than overtime, we were able to build the department up gradually over many, many, many years. And all the way through fiscal 24, which feels like 10 lifetimes ago for me at this point, things in Easton were trending in a really good direction. Our reserve balances were the highest they've been ever. Our new growth was getting ready to take off like a rocket. Our staff morale was high. We had new facilities on the way. Things were going the right way. Obviously, I believe Westwood is also in the GIC. Easton is as well. So we've kind of pulled on a lot of those levers a long time ago. The things that when people say, well, you have a revenue gap, just cut the budget by $1 million. Okay, thank you. For me, that means laying off 12 police and somebody can get severely hurt or worse. So we did the healthcare reform. We've regionalized services. That's not saying we never sit on our hands and say, oh, we tried and we're out of ideas and now despair is us. So we were trending in the right direction. Our department became a destination of where people wanted to be. We had good equipment. We had new buildings on the way. We have a good chief. We have a good union. And I'd like to think from the outside, folks look at it and say we have great civilian and elected leadership as well in a good community. So we had folks transferring in. And heading into 25, it was clear, still remember seeing the kind of 10% plus estimate for premium increases right after the holidays, that things were about to change and about to get quite hard. And so we, anticipating that we were going to face a major deficit going to 26, we put a hiring freeze in place as vacancies occurred, so that if we were going to have to cut positions going into fiscal 26 without an override, which an override was proposed, was not adopted, and that's exactly what to do, that we took the preventative steps on the front end so that we could minimize the amount of involuntary forced layoffs that are obviously traumatic and horrible things to do to people. What ended up happening going into 26, although only 2 out of, I believe, 46 positions were cut from the budget, everything wrong happened at the right time, where that occurred with some long-term injuries that will result in retirement. 2 of our captains were poached to become deputy chief and fire chief, which is, I think, a sign that you're doing a pretty good job. But then a lot of the folks in the department, especially in a reverse seniority union, were shaken, and they left to seek more stable employment. The chief can testify to, and I believe Vice Chair Privatera can as well, that as generations change, the priorities of police and firefighters also change. The days of folks wanting to do an enormous amount of overtime voluntarily are not gone, but there's far fewer. A lot of younger staff want to spend that time with family, where they have second jobs. And so we went from a model of having 4 groups of 11 dropping to 8, which was working for us, to basically being at 8, stay at 8, meaning that every time somebody was either sick, injured, called out for any reason, we had overtime. We were getting to a point, and this was in the span of 6 months. So we were getting to a point very quickly where this was not acceptable from a safety standpoint. And so we had to take a really hard look at things that, again, not to keep putting you on the spot, but you are here, so thank you for being here, Chief. Chief can testify to, is not a popular thing to discuss or to consider or implement in Massachusetts. Not only amongst the PFFM and your local, but among fire chiefs, because EMS has become part of the fabric of the fire service in Massachusetts. But I think one of the most important things about being a good leader is that when times are hard, we need to operate with the choices we have, not the choices we wish we had. And so the chief, the deputy, and I, and with a lot of discussions with the union, because concurrent with this, coincidentally, we were also negotiating a 3-year collective bargaining agreement with the fire union, which I'm proud to say has been resolved and ratified and funded Monday night. We basically took an approach of just complete openness between the union leadership, between civilian leadership, between the chief, of looking at what were our options, looking at it from an operational perspective of if we do X, then how many people can we put on an engine? If we do Y, what's the impact to overtime and to morale? And so we spent months crunching the numbers and came to the conclusion that the number one thing we had to do was stabilize the department, because it was resulting in so much forced overtime that it was like a run on the bank. If we didn't find a way to put a floor under that's unacceptable. Fire department can't keep you safe if they're not safe or they're not feeling safe. And so we'll move to a model that will, in a roundabout way, get Easton back to having 11 or sometimes 12 firefighter and EMS on a group, which we need. We have a town that is 28 square miles of 114 miles of road. That's a lot of ground to cover. It's not fast. It's not easy to get from the northeast part of Easton to the southwest. So we worked with the union to incorporate into that collective bargaining agreement kind of preemptive impact bargaining for what would this look like. And I'm very proud of that. We got that done. We're moving in that direction now. It was not because I wanted it, or the chief wanted it, or the select board wanted it. But we spent a year hosting dozens of public meetings, bearing our financial soul on television about the challenges we were going to face in 2026. And while our override proposal budget, which would have sustained the fire department at the rate of where it was, passed town meeting, it did not pass at the ballot. And it wasn't close. And so we have to operate in the reality that we have and make really hard choices to try to protect our staff and protect the public. It was one of the harder things I've had to do in my career, and I'm nearly certain the hardest thing the chief has had to do in his. And I give a lot of credit. I know some of my folks at home are watching, to the chief, to the deputy, and to our fire union. I think that's probably the most significant example of how important it is that you have relationships with your workforce so that they believe that you sincerely care about them, because I do, and that you are trying to make the best of a borderline impossible situation to make them safe and to do the best that you can with the tools you have.
Thank you. I mean, that was the purpose of the question. It was not to suggest that you would be looking to do something like that here, but to illustrate in a very clear and specific way what your leadership and approach to problem solving is. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Joe.
All righty. Connor, let me rephrase this. When you first became the town administrator, were you an intern prior to that?
Yeah, so this is a very fun story about how at 27 years old I was somehow the town clerk, the assistant town manager, and the town administrator at the same time.
Congratulations.
Yes, thank you. I jumped ahead of you. Would you like me to describe that situation? or
No,
what?
no, that's fine. Let me, I've got an easy question for you.
Oh, good.
Okay, so, when you stepped into your role as a town administrator from your other wonderful role, did anything jump out at you as far as an area or concern or a department that needed to be addressed right away, and how did you handle that?
It's a great question. So I went from assistant to interim to town administrator in the span of, I think, 8 to 9 months. So that was a very difficult period of my career and life. But I had an advantage, which is that I'd already been working in the organization for more than 5 years. And so I understood and had those relationships with those department heads. I understood the operations a good bit, certainly not as well as I do at this point in my life and career. And so, thinking back to 2017, the real priority for Easton, as I stepped into both the interim and then permanent role, was stabilizing the organization financially and from a leadership perspective, because I became interim on 2 days' notice and had to shepherd a mostly complete operating budget through a town meeting while doing 3 executive roles with a staff of 2, counting me. And we had just had an override fail the summer before. So, like, if you could kind of design in a laboratory the least fun set of circumstances to be tested publicly, that might have been it. But we made it. So the priority was stabilizing the leadership and stabilizing the budget. And so we'll get into it, I'm sure, but that's what I did.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So earlier we talked about budgeting, and you touched on, Easton having a history of relying on sort of
Yes.
one-time sources of funds, right? And so, like so many other municipalities, we have budget pressures here in Westwood and a similarly exhausted tax base.
Yes.
So how would you balance the sources and uses of funds to ensure the maintenance of the level of service that residents have come to know and expect here in Westwood?
That's a great question, and I promise this is the only other paper I'm going to give you tonight. You will be happy to know that I think that was my very first question. And the second one was the ambulance. First one was why
Thank you.
free cash. So the department heads did well for you, and you are doing the right thing for your citizens by asking.
Yes, just let me interrupt for 1 second. This document will be made available tomorrow on the website. We'll scan it and make sure that everybody gets a copy, or if you would forward to Joan an electronic copy, that'd be great.
Great.
Thank you.
And so what that is, that's a kind of couple of slides from our town meeting this spring on what has Easton done to grapple with that structural deficit. I don't want to go too far down into the weeds into Easton, because you folks have all my materials, you have that, but for the chair, back to your question of how would I approach budgeting in Westwood to maintain the extremely high level of service that you provide here with a tax base that's starting to be tapped out. I think that my skill set would serve the community well because, as I'm sure you've seen, there's not been very many easy budget years in my entire career. If any, frankly. I think like maybe literally one. Having to prioritize, to find grant money, to find efficiencies without cutting services has been basically breathing in Easton for 14 years. So because we run so lean, I also understand at a very human level the impact of a tax increase for the folks living in town or of a budget cut. Because, much like Westwood, we're a human service organization. The overwhelming majority of our operations are our people. And so it's not as simple as, well, just cut your spending. The budget growth in my tenure for the town departments has been about 3.25%, which is lower than the annualized rate of inflation. We have collective bargaining agreements. We have contractual obligations. We have service needs that we have to meet, regardless of how we feel from a management and financial philosophy. If your ambulance volume is going vertical, you need to deal with that. And so I suppose what I would say, as far as how would I bring that experience and those hard lessons to Westwood, is that I have a great amount of admiration and respect for this community, for what it has invested in. I believe your Director of Human Services said that Westwood has been investing in civilian mental health clinicians since the 80s. That's phenomenal and decades ahead of the curve. I have a lot of admiration and respect for what the priorities of this community have been through your budgets, because budgets are value statements. I have a lot of reverence and a small amount of jealousy of your AAA bond rating. And I know what it's like to have to crawl over glass to balance a budget under extraordinarily difficult circumstances, of debating at town meeting with upset parents, attempting to amend my proposal to put stabilization fund into the police department, to add school resource officers in the wake of Parkland, and explain to them why, even if they succeed in that amendment, I will refuse to hire that police officer. So, I didn't mean to get so dark, but, you know, everyone's a good captain in calm seas. And it's been a bit wavy, and I feel like we've made a lot of progress, and that if I came here, it's very evident in your written presentations and the way you carry yourselves. I believe, Marianne, you're a former finance committee member, so I'm certainly not trying to get one by you. You value very much your bond rating, your approach to reserves, and your services. To the question of taxation, that is going to be a real challenge for you, because you folks, I believe, are at a shift that's almost tapped out for your commercial split. Is that correct?
Yeah, we have a little bit of room. We're typically at about 1.7.
Okay. But you're seeing at a larger scale, or at least from the good amount of your documents I've reviewed, a challenge that Easton is seeing too. Easton is right now about 87-13 residential versus CIP value, which is actually not
Comparable.
Yeah, not as far off. And I expected it to be larger here because of University Station and all the development you have going on. And I don't say that as a criticism, I say that in sympathy as a colleague stuck in the dark with you of, I know why, which is your residential values are defying gravity. They're going up 10% a year, right? And just because of the way that commercial property is assessed, net operating income, the leases, that generally, even if they're growing, it's gonna be a couple points a year. You may, in every individual year, be just crushing it on commercial growth. In Easton, we've had years where half of our growth was commercial. And I'm looking at the DLS form, I'm like, why isn't there more commercial revenue? And that's because you do great in that year and it immediately loses ground to your residential value. Unfortunately, and in a kind of twisted way, because this is such a great place people want to be, right? It's supply and demand. People want to be in this community. That's going to keep pushing your home values up, and it's going to keep that dynamic where your residential property growth is going to outpace your commercial growth. And so to finally answer your question about what are some ways that you would think about that, Nora and I had a good conversation about this, which is there are some really key developments here. And I think you've done an amazing job, and I promise I would tell you that if I wasn't asking for a job. So this is an awesome place. You have a really good mix of a lot of commercial density, of open space preservation, of single-family homes, but I know that one of the things that was identified in the position statement, and I've watched a few of your meetings, that University Station has some more milestones to hit. And I know you folks did a TIF and hotel, Home Square. I don't know, is it Home 2 or Home Square?
Homes two.
Okay, Homes 2 is on the way, so that was a good call, good for you. I think you have to take a look at, okay, where are the development areas? Where are things working? I'm very impressed at how rapidly you adopted 3A compliant zoning and that you have I think it's actually open.
No, ribbon cutting in about 2 weeks.
That's amazing, right? As you surely know, many of your peers sought paper compliance. So that's great. I think that housing has to be a part of the discussion. A lot of folks look at economic development and trying to spread your tax base out as this kind of binary, it's black or white. You have to have commercial and you have to put downward pressure on residential. And I don't think that's realistic. I think that it's worth doing a kind of self-check on those key development agreements, many of which in Easton we have a 40R transit-oriented development. The development agreement was originally penned in 2008. I don't even know if iPhones existed in 2008. right? And I think for University Station, it's the mid-2010s, is that right? I think it's worth taking a look at what are the particular obligations of these agreements when it comes to things like commercial versus residential split, certain architectural requirements. I'm not saying abandon that. Again, I actually want the job. But you look at it and say, do our priorities from 15 years ago, first of all, does that still reflect what the real priorities are? Does that reflect reality, right? We can want brick and mortar retail all we want. But think about how different that macroeconomic environment is now than before a pandemic, before the supply chain was hit with a sledgehammer, before inflation. So I think you look at what you have. What are the ingredients you have available to you? You folks clearly have an excellent planning department. You use good state tools like TIFs and things like that to try and get, those things to pencil. Because at the end of the day, I think sometimes folks look at these really large plan developments that are going to take years and years and sometimes even decades to build out under good economic circumstances, and they stall or they get stuck on things for a bit. And I think sometimes people look at that and say, oh, these developers, they're not doing what they're supposed to do. It's like, developers want to make money. If they could make money, they'd be doing it, right? And so that, you kind of got to read the room, and if you see these things stalling, I think it's worth taking a look and say, okay, are our land use regulations, are our policies, are they actually achieving what we profess to want, which is to incentivize that growth? And again, none of that is critical at all. I think you've all done an excellent job. And you have some challenges, right? That shift is going to be a challenge. I don't have an answer for you yet. I think I have good questions to ask, and you have an excellent team, and so I think if anyone can figure it out, it's going to be all of us. But you also have a lot of really, really powerful tools in your toolkit, right? This is a prosperous community, it's a successful community. This is a place people want to be. Your location of the city, your infrastructure is unbelievable, right? I mean, your sewer access, Amtrak train, you have a lot of things in your favor. So I think it's doable, but I think it's about taking a look at where are things hung up. Is it because we're expecting things from a 2010 lens when that world is long gone? Are there opportunities to maybe shift without abandoning Westwood's priorities to keep that growth going in a way that can help spread that tax base out?
Thank you. Mary Ann.
Yeah. You're right in that we are a prosperous community, and I say this all the time, but in the sense that the people who live here are incredible. And they give so much to this town and contribute to our local government, and you will find an expert in Westwood on anything. Sure. Whatever it is you're looking for, you will find that person here. So it truly is a prosperous community in that regard. But with respect to the tax base, as you know, it is one pie. We've got to accommodate all of the municipal services and the schools as well. Could you speak a little more to your approach to budget building and your approach to working with the schools to ensure that we are maintaining sustainable services?
Sure, that's a great question, and it's a super important one because not making a value judgment here, but just quantitative reality. School budget is your budget, right? Every single municipal department can just be rocking it and getting all their awards, and if school budget's going up 10% a year, you're going to have a very bad time, right? And so not to sound like a broken record, but my approach to that is you build relationships. You maintain, I think, the relationship between a town administrator and select board is critical. The relationship between the town administrator and the department head is critical. So important to have a good relationship with the superintendent. And I'm very proud to say that I think I have a very good one with Dr. Cabral and Easton. So you work together on budgeting and you approach that collaborative process by having norms around that process, I think both informally and formally. And so informally, you build relationships. You spend time together. You show legitimate and genuine curiosity in the operations, because there's some areas where it overlaps, but others where it's different, right? And I think sometimes folks, they may shock you to know that at managers' conferences, occasionally people scoff and say, oh, these superintendents. You know, everyone has a PhD and they're not putting the budget together the right way. I don't find that particularly constructive. I think it's, or necessarily true, frankly. I think it's a good thing to get to know the leadership team of the schools, understand the school committee, understand what the residents and the parents of your community value. And to appreciate that, much like our tax base is all one pie, so is our operating budget. And we can get into technicalities about how the school committee can adopt whatever they want. It's one family, right? And so I take the kind of JFK, rising tide, all boats view that it is in all of our collective self-interest to look out for and help the other. The community of Westwood is not going to continue to thrive and be vibrant if the schools of Westwood are struggling. The police and fire department are eventually going to pay a price if the schools are not thriving. And similarly, the schools cannot be successful if we are chronically underfunding our municipal services. So I think building a relationship of shared and mutual respect and mutual reliance is really important, and that's kind of the informal norms. And then formally, in Easton, we have something called the Budget Subcommittee. It seems very similar to you have a Budget Steering Committee, where, you know, I think a lot of places sometimes put all their eggs in a basket of the institutional knowledge of whoever the incumbents are. They don't turn stuff into policy, and then someone leaves, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, man, where'd that committee go? Well, there was no charge? What are we even supposed to do? And so in Easton, we formalized through a town meeting, either a town meeting vote or a bylaw, the creation of a budget subcommittee, which has representation from the elected, appointed, and chief financial leadership of the town and schools to meet publicly, routinely, and talk about what are the trends we're looking at, what are the long-range things that we're concerned about that are threats to the schools, the town, both, what are the unfunded mandates that are coming, what are the changes in state legislation that are going to land on us like a bag of bricks, who's going to the State House this week, and that is the kind of formal approach, so that as time passes, as leaders change, as elections happen, you have that formalized framework in place to collaborate and to cooperate. So I think it's about building those relationships and collaborating and knowing that you could trust one another.
Thank you.
Just to back up what you said in terms of your working relationship with Dr. Cabral.
Yes.
I believe her letter is the third in your list of recommended letters, their letters of recommendation here. And I just read through the 3 pages, and it was glowing. And so I will make sure that these are also part of the packet that get entered into the record.
Sure.
But thank you for providing those.
Thank you.
Joe?
Very proud of that.
I thought that analysis, that symbiosis between the municipal side and the school side was well put. I like that.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask a question about, I'm going to drill down a little bit. Part of it just to learn for myself. Assets and policies are kind of similar. They have to be reviewed periodically. How do you manage assets in Easton, such as your motor vehicle fleet or your cell phones? Do you periodically look at the usage of those? Do you periodically look at the usage of the cell phones? How do you handle that?
Yes. Personally, myself, no, I don't. Again, that's where it comes in on, there are other people who are more competent at that, but we do have an asset management plan through Department of Public Works that keeps track of our facilities and our fleet. That's incorporated on the facilities and horizontal infrastructure side with a GIS system that we have that has our infrastructure mapped into that and has work order systems layered into that as well, so that we can keep track of the tickets coming into buildings and grounds, where are those hot spots. We can use that to understand which water mains are breaking more than others. And it's not always the oldest ones, right? Sometimes we shouldn't say this, but we have some from the 1800s, but they built things right. It's still going well. And others that of a certain vintage, particularly in the post-World War II era, where a lot of that metal was thinned out and they break a lot. So by using technology, you can have a good grasp. You can't manage a set of assets if you don't know what assets you have, right? So you need a good inventory. You need the ability to track that inventory. You want to have data-driven ways of quantifying that. You know, we need a new $700,000 truck because this one's bad, doesn't cut it. in Easton, and I doubt it would cut it here. And so you keep track of the life cycle replacement of certain pieces in your fleet. You implement, as I believe Westwood does, a road surface rating pavement management plan to have a quantitative score assigned to your roads so that you can make intelligent choices with limited resources, right? Because they're not unlimited anywhere. So I think that touches a bit on managing the physical assets. I believe then we have more routine things like computer replacement cycles, having replacement cycles based on the type of user, what type of device are they using. Yeah, so that does that answer your question about managing physical assets and fleet?
I was more curious what you do. If you have 200 cars in Easton,
Yes.
how do you know? You have to pay for the insurance, the
Yes.
maintenance, the gasoline. How do you know you still need 200 cars?
So from a kind of operational need perspective, every year when we go through the budget building process, in Easton, the charter is a very strong town administrator. The budget belongs to and is the responsibility of the town administrator, as is the capital budget. And so your name is on it, and you are expected to be at town meeting to explain it and to defend it. And so when we do the budget process in Easton and we request operating budget and capital budget submittals through our departments, myself and the finance director sit down with every single department, go through their operating requests, their staff levels, go through their capital requests, how those things overlap and work together. And given the resource constraints we have, one of the most common questions is, can we eliminate this? Can we move this? Can we put this over here? Is this still needed? So we have a kind of formalized process through the operating and capital submittal where I feel that I have a pretty good grasp, although I'm not the one who's personally managing the work orders, on the size of our fleet, the condition of our fleet, how that's fitting within a policy to move towards greener vehicles, which I know your police department is doing, and how that fits with our staff. We also, on many of our vehicles, have AVL, so we can see where they're going, who's driving them, what they're being used for. And so I think having the ability to collect that data on a day-to-day basis and having that annual operating and capital submittal process, and in Easton, we have a finance committee who makes recommendations on all warrant articles. We also have a capital planning committee that is charged by bylaw with reviewing and prioritizing collectively with myself and the finance director, every single department, including the schools, capital requests using a specific matrix of priority with life safety at the top, maintenance of an existing asset lower, and doing that prioritization, and ultimately is the responsibility of the town administrator and the finance director to recommend the capital budget to a town meeting. And so I hope I've answered your question.
Connor, I'm mindful of time as it's 9 o'clock, but I do have one I hope can be the last question before we let you give a closing statement.
Sure.
You mentioned earlier a very impressive array of capital improvement projects that
Yes.
you've overseen in Easton. You know, half your elementary schools, and I believe it was 95% of your municipal buildings.
It's all of our elementary schools.
Yeah, all your elementary schools. So you're clearly aware of our dual facility studies and that our needs outpace our resources. So,
Very helpful little
yes.
guide.
So, talk about your experience in being able to fund all of that work, how you were able to do it and not be run out of town on a rail for raising people's taxes through the roof.
Thank you. So we had a Doran Whittier study actually done in 2014, because at that time it was widely recognized by our civilian or elected leadership and residents that our public facilities were in a sad state of affairs that was no longer acceptable to the children of Easton and the first responders and the folks who work in them. And so thankfully our voters funded that comprehensive facilities plan. What we did, and I promise I've read through yours quite a bit, but I couldn't find an exact spreadsheet of the exact same, is that we basically extrapolated all of that into our ongoing 5-year capital improvement plan, where as part of that bylaw and asset management, we track 5 years worth of anticipated capital spend for every single department, so that ideally you're not in a situation where in fiscal '24 you're funding some multi-million-dollar investment that was not shown as a priority on the horizon, right? And so in our case, don't quote me on the exact number, but I think the number, because this was pre-COVID inflation for our facilities needs, was somewhere in the high 8 digits, close to 100 million. Just for repair, right? As Doran Whittier is always careful about, this is kind of repair and renovate. This doesn't speak to programmatic appropriateness, which is a really important consideration, particularly with schools, with public buildings. It doesn't speak to response times, which is critical for fire departments. And so our approach to it was we had this great foundational document, right? So that's a really good start. And it's excellent that you have that now. That will give you a good foundation for the substantial amount of work. I believe hundreds of millions of dollars of facilities repairs that are in front of Westwood. And as I told the superintendent, it's going to be okay. So shortly after that report was complete, which identified that our 3 elementary schools were incredibly deficient in every way. They were programmatically insufficient. They were too small. They had hazardous materials in them. One of them was a building that was bought by the town that used to be a kind of dormitorium for Stonehill, and the entire second floor of classrooms had no walls. They were separated by bookshelves on wheels. That's obviously unacceptable. You don't necessarily need a Doran Whittier study to tell you that, but that really helped put a fine point on what are the priorities. Because as I believe, Mr. Chair, you identified out of the gate, even in a AAA community, it is impossible to do everything the exact way folks would like in the sequence they would like. So you have the ingredients here that we had in Easton to make some hard calls on prioritization, which is what you will have to do. And if you select me, and I'm fortunate enough to have that offer, I will help you do. Because what that meant is when we were invited into the program at MSBA, right, when we got in through that statement of interest, and as you folks I believe know, when the MSBA comes knocking, you do it, right? Because if you fund that feasibility and it doesn't get approved, you might not get another chance for a very long time. So only one of our 3 elementary schools was invited into the process. And I believe it was going to be a roughly $34 to $35 million project back in the before times, in the mid-2010s. And we fought hard collectively, the superintendent, town administration, select board, school committee, finance committee, together to work to get the MSBA to agree to broaden the scope of that to a redistricting and consolidation and replacement of all 3 at once, which, as I'm sure you folks can imagine, was controversial, right? For all their kind of material defects, these were people's neighborhood schools that their kids go to, that they went to, that their grandparents might have gone to. And going from small, especially for your youngest learners, going from small schools to a 160,000 square foot building seems overwhelming and like the wrong call. And so we worked really hard with the school committee, with the school planning committee, and the public and our educators to look at that once we got invited in, to make sure it was programmatically appropriate, make sure that you use the architectural tools that you can so that it's not like The Shining with like 1,000-foot hallways. You use angles and little neighborhood feels. And I'm very proud to say my daughter goes to that school now. And I think if I had to pick one thing outside of the team I have and the people that I get to serve that I'm most proud of, it's that school. So we got invited, we expanded the scope, which is not always popular, right? But we did so because although it made the price tag go from mid-30s to 100 million, which at the time was larger than our operating budget, it is still so much cheaper than attempting to do all 3 separately over the next 15 years. And so thankfully, we did our jobs. Voters overwhelmingly approved that debt exclusion. And some of it's luck. It's luck and it's not waiting. When you have big projects, it can feel extremely overwhelming. And a lot of people will say, well, let's stop, let's wait, maybe things will change. You can pull the MSBA per square foot cost data for public construction. It goes one way and it's up. It's a matter of how fast. So if your concern is efficiency for your taxpayer, waiting doesn't help. It hurts. And so by consolidating that and addressing the 3 most significantly deficient school buildings, we received approval from the state. And we also had, not to try and turn this into, the rocket science, but we also had a 40B mitigation package fund the entire feasibility phase, which got that moving pretty quick. We got approval for that in 2019, and thank God the design, we didn't stop when the pandemic hit. And so, well, we're designing this thing on Zoom then. And then it went out to bid, and we locked in pricing in early 21 before inflation took off like a rocket. And so because we persevered through COVID, because we expanded the scope to be bold and go after more problems than less, we ended up delivering that project on time and 13 million under budget. And with the MSBA share, what we had forecasted for voters, and this is another thing, you lead with the ugly part. So I was there with charts and graphs, and here's how much your taxes will go up. We had forecasted to voters, and they had approved that what we expected would have been a $435 roughly increase in annual taxes, which at that time in Easton was a little more than 5% per year, and we delivered it at $285. We did this at the same time that we used community choice energy aggregation that I had the pleasure of working with Bernie on, again, a lifetime ago, got in the market before the invasion of Ukraine. And in Easton, our residents have saved more money on electricity than the cumulative cost of that debt exclusion. So that's been paid for that way. So we expanded the scope and went after all of them at once. And so what that means now in Easton is that
I think that's a really creative way of providing savings that are not a direct tax savings, but a savings out of their wallet as well, and using that as a rationale to cover.
That's right. Yeah, because at the end of the day, it's money, right? Folks, you can make an efficiency argument all day long to folks, but their groceries have gone up 30%. Their utilities are crushing them. No one will be impressed that you kept the tax increase to 3 or 4, right? It's a tough time. And so that was how we addressed the schools. And by doing so, with our municipal building committee, which I left out, and I apologize to those who might be watching, we have a municipal building committee, a permanent municipal building committee in Easton who's charged with providing civilian oversight, citizen oversight to any project over a certain dollar amount. And so we worked with them using our GIS system to have our director of public works go through and create a GIS layer of all property owned in Easton, all buildings on that with a property card, much like an assessor's database showing the year it was built, square footage, and its door and Whittier basically state of repair. And to prioritize. And so in 2019, shortly after Blanche Ames was approved and we were getting to work on that, municipal building committee said, okay, now we got to get to these municipal buildings because Easton had not repaired or replaced any in an extremely long time. We have folks woodworking in sheds from the 1800s. We have a DPW that was basically a garage built in 1952 that has no floor drains, it has no ventilation. We have fire departments with no sprinklers, you name it. And so the recommendation from the Director of Public Works was that we know from Blanche Ames that consolidation is more expensive up front, but will save, depending on how you want to count with interest, tens or hundreds of millions of dollars. And that got shelved for a year because COVID happened. Picked the ball back up, went to town meeting, I think, in 2021. And again, you lead with the hard part. You can tuck feasibility into an omnibus capital budget and kind of hope no one at town meeting asks a question, right? It's not the right thing to do, but there are some folks who've done it. I'm sure it shocked you, not my style. Went out of our way to say, to be clear, if you fund this feasibility for police, fire, and public works, this is the first step that will lead to a debt exclusion. And we know you just approved one 2 years ago, but these needs are significant. It was approved, got to work, brought that project to town meeting and the ballot in 2023, and that was approved far more narrowly than the schools because not only did construction costs go up, there's no MSBA for cities and towns. And so I have had the honor to be invited and testify in front of the state legislature on a number of issues. I kind of get brought out for PFAS very often, but municipal building authority is a pretty close second. Because most cities and towns in Massachusetts, when you drive around, you're going to see a lot of nice schools and a lot of really sad police, fire, and public works buildings. That's not because voters don't care about those services. It's because it is the rational thing to do to prioritize a school when the state's going to put money on the table, right? So thankfully for us, and thankfully for me, the voters of Easton, although Easton doesn't approve operating overrides regularly, have been extremely supportive of debt exclusions. And so after Blanche Ames was built, the average age of construction or major renovation of the school campus is 2008. So that leaves the town buildings. And so that's what we went after. We worked incredibly hard for it. I'm happy to keep you later after. I know I'm going long. We did an incredible outreach effort where, again, we know you lead with the hard part. Once the schematic budget started to come in, and again, we were working with Door and Whittier numbers from 2014, now post-COVID. So we knew it would be sticker shock, but the 9-digit project budget came in, as it always does, like 20 minutes before you were going on TV to talk about it. And a colleague of mine at Town Hall calls my desk phone. she received it at the same time, and I pick up, she goes, "You're gonna get fired." I was like, "Thank you so much for a vote of confidence." Click. And we didn't hide it. Massively expensive. $150 million project budget. And we leaned into that and we didn't try to split hairs or find a creative way to say it's not expensive. No, it's hugely expensive. There's no MSBA, so the tax increase is going to be much more than the school. And just acknowledge that with people and be real with them that, yeah, I hate that number too. But something we have in common is that we're both going to hate it a whole lot more if we kick this can 10 more years and then it's $250 million, because that's what it will be. And so we held, I think, somewhere between 30 and 40 community meetings in a 6-week period between Labor Day approximately and the November election and the town meeting. We went anywhere, it's kind of a joke, but it's also true. If there was 2 people in a room in Easton, me, the director of public works, police chief and fire chief were there. It was like being in a band again. We went everywhere. We were practically living with each other. And we would go anywhere people would have us because, again, these are super weedy, complex projects. People are not going to watch a 4-hour select board meeting. And that's not because they don't care. They have a lot going on. So we went to concert series. We went to the farm festival. We did tables at PTA meetings. And we laid out for people and sent direct mailers to people with a dedicated website of here's all the ways you can engage. Here's all of our documents, right? You take the approach of just put all of it online. Someone's going to ask you. Just do it, right?
Yep.
So have all those financial reports out there. Just have it there in the first place. And we concluded every one of our presentations. That started to grow over time. The first one, we did a direct mailer to every house in Easton, and it was going to be a walkthrough of a DPW, and I think like 4 people came. I'm like, oh man, we were in so much trouble. A month later, we had police and fire, and it was standing room only. News channels were coming, which doesn't really happen usually. Something really bad is going on in this day and age. And word was spreading, and people were paying attention. So we brought people into the stations, right, to see firsthand what they were like, what the working condition for our first responders were. We took an approach of we have to do a full court press on every front. We went anywhere people would be. We concluded all those presentations with, here's the next 15 of them. If somehow none of these work for you, here's my email. I'll come to your house. And we did, numerous times. Went to people's living rooms, went to people's backyard barbecues to talk about debt exclusions, as one does, right? And it worked. I will not say that there are not folks who are frustrated with that. I think that that's certainly the case. I don't try to persuade them out of that frustration. It was expensive. But what I do try to do, that's within my control, is make sure that we have an awesome project team, which is what we have, in that we work just as hard on this project, which will replace more than a dozen buildings with 3 consolidated, brand new police, fire, public safety buildings on 2 sites. That we do that with as much intensity and purpose on controlling those costs as we did with the elementary school, and I'm proud to say that the contract was awarded $9 million under budget. Now that I'm saying that out loud, they will find plutonium in the ground tomorrow. That it is trending under budget, that the tax impact that we forecast for that so far is trending significantly less, and that we're going to keep it that way. We found the money we could for a municipal project, which is hard. It takes advantage of Inflation Reduction Act reverse tax credits for going full geothermal for all HVAC needs on the site. We are taking advantage of mass save for similar things by not having fossil fuel for our domestic needs. And we're using a kind of waterfall fund management approach of where are other areas that we can fund this for. The entire water division is going to move from the 1945 schoolhouse that they currently work in into a consolidated, for the first time, a consolidated public works facility in Easton. That's a water project. Our water rate in Easton is actually comparatively extremely low because up until PFAS, we had no treatment plants at all wells, great water. It was award-winning from a DP for a very long time, stopped for a minute with PFAS. We're back to the awards now.
Thank you for a very
gone over.
thorough answer.
I like those projects, if you can tell.
That's great. So with that, I'm going to allow you to make a closing statement to the community and to us. And again, thank you for your thoroughness.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I do not have a prepared closing statement, so I will, I guess, just speak off the cuff here. This has been one of the hardest things I've done in my career. I care extremely deeply about Easton. I care very much about my team. I care about the relationships I've built there over 14 years with the elected officials and with the citizens. This is the only municipality that I've sought to be a town administrator in since my appointment as town administrator in Easton 9 years ago. And I'm sharing this with you to I suppose, convey to you the gravity of what this means for me personally and for my family and for my team, who I love, frankly. And to therefore be a reflection of how wonderful of a place I think Westwood is. And what a good team of department heads you have, who are very intense, which I'm sure you can see I can hang with, but also just good people who are funny, which you really, really need in this work. Like, you have to be able to laugh, because otherwise you're crying. You have good staff, you have an amazing reputation. This is a community nationally recognized for excellence. This is a desirable place to live. This is a desirable place to work. Very few municipalities in Massachusetts are AAA. And again, that doesn't mean you have no challenges. You do. But I think that I've worked through some pretty tough things in my career that give me the thickness of skin and the skill set that I could be of real value here, that I could hopefully do a lot of good. Because that's, at the end of the day, as I told you in the intro, what motivates me. I'm not trying to be the mayor. I'm trying to do a really good job. I want to see kids going to safe schools, parents excited that that's their kid's school. I want firefighters to have proper decon and to feel safe in their buildings. I want to see the community that I lead succeed. And I think my record shows that it's not just what I want, it's what I do. And I've just been so thankful to be part of this process, to get to know the three of you, to get to know your department heads. And I really hope that I get to spend a little more time with a few of you, if I'll meet with all of you between Sunday night. But really just very thankful for the opportunity, very impressed with the three of you and the team that you have here, and grateful to the citizens of Westwood for the opportunity to take up so much of your evening. Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Bernie, thank you very much for all the work in vetting the candidates. Ford, I see you are here as a member of the screening committee. Thank you to you and Jack and all the members of the screening committee. This was an excellent process with some very highly qualified candidates, and thank you, Connor, for your time.
Appreciate it.
May I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned.